Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on another episode of the Solar Manual. This is our second one that we're doing. For those of you who don't know what this is, I'm going to take the liberty to tell you right now. I just explained it to Brett. So, Brett, sorry, you're going to hear it again. This is meant for all sales reps, sales managers, sales regionals, even C-suite executives, W-2 employees, anybody that doesn't quite understand some of the terms or some of the knowledge. Oftentimes, when sales reps are inside of a home, they're competing against other companies, and there could be opposing information. And what we wanted to do is create a neutral resource for the entire industry to go to find out what the true answer is, even if that means that you're finding out before you normally do. Sometimes sales reps or even homeowners find out about adders or expenses that could happen after they have signed the agreements, and it could change the price of the contract. It could change commission. It can change even the likelihood of your customer continuing with you. So we thought it might be good to create a resource that you could utilize and implement inside of your sales process or inside of your customer service process if you're answering those phone calls, and use this book to determine what is accurate for your homeowner or not. So today we actually have a guest with us. His name is Brett Nielsen. He's actually on here as our asphalt shingle roofing expert. There are many different types of roofs, and this one is the most prevalent, most popular, most utilized roof. And I'm glad that we could have Brett on here because he truly is a professional on this. Before we get to Brett, though, I want to reintroduce you to David if you have not met him. A lot of times there's some information that I have learned over the years that I might be spewing off to Brett, and he might be coming right back. David is in there to stop that communication and ask questions that maybe not everyone realizes or understands. We want that entry-level, novice-based type of question coming in. But David, you've been doing this for about 4 years, haven't you, Solar?
Correct. Yeah, it's not new to me. But I'm acting as the lay person, the lay salesperson, and as you know, everyone, I'm always learning. So I'm here to learn and interject when you guys are talking too high level.
Oh, very good. So without further ado, here is our expert. This expert is here to cross-check the things that I say, because I would feel very silly putting something in a book and having it be incorrect. That wouldn't be very fun. So we do have cross-checks happening throughout this process. And Brett is on here to help us with that cross-checked information and also add supplemental information that you and I might not know. I learned a new one today, the International Residential Building Code. That sounds like something that should be pretty standard, and it is. It's out there. I didn't know it was. I learned that this morning. So we'll dive into that a little bit and find out more about what that is. But before we proceed, Brett, why are you an expert in the field of asphalt shingle roofs?
It's a great question, and thanks for having me on, man. This is a really cool podcast, and excited to be on as an expert. Yeah, I've been in the industry for going on 17 years, from the East Coast, primarily asphalt shingle roofing in that space. Also, for your audience, I spent 15 years in the solar sales space. So my current role is VP of products at K2 Systems, and I'm responsible for our product development, testing, certifications, engineering. But the majority of my time in the industry has been as a solar sales rep with homeowners and business owners. So I have that background, I have that perspective. It's been a while for me. I've actually, most of that time, I've been a racking sales rep throughout the country. So I do think I kind of bring that unique perspective, right, where you're kind of blending, what it is homeowners, construction, roofing companies are concerned about. And, over the last few years that I've been in my current role, definitely getting a really good education on, what it takes to certify, engineer, and build products that are code compliant.
Well, that is amazing. I have some questions for you. The audience might chime in and ask some questions as well. You up for that?
Sure. Absolutely.
All right. Here we go. We're all meant here to learn. So please ask all the questions that you would like to. This is meant to be a place where everybody could leave and have more information to go make yourself more successful at your career. So let's focus on that. And to give you all an example, I showed this a little bit earlier, but I want to give you an example of what we're shooting for here in this book. The book is called The Solar Manual because if you go into your glove box of your car and you pull out that manual, You don't have to read it as an entertaining book. You can actually just go to the index and find out where the product is that you're meaning to talk about, flip to those pages, learn a little excerpt, and go on about your life. So let me show you a little example of this. You might have seen this on the Facebook groups if you're in it. Here we go. Share screen. And I'm just going to share my entire screen with you here. But what we would like to do is put pictures in there. Now, this is the rough draft. The final draft will be much prettier and easier to use. This one specifically is on ground mounts. But as you go through on ground mounts, you can start to learn things that maybe you haven't learned before. Some of my favorite things to learn is why you need a solar array divisible by 4. 33 panels might create an odd shape. 32 panels will not. And it's important to tell your homeowner that, or what it looks like stacking them horizontal versus vertical, and why some installers might like that and save some money on racking. There's a whole lot of things in here as to why a sales rep might want to know this stuff, so that when you're in the home, you can price things properly and set proper expectations. For example, cutting cement in case you need to trench a line to the electrical. What that looks like if you have to pour new cement. Might be interesting to warn the homeowners, hey, if we pour new cement, the color might not match. But one cool thing people are doing is putting pavers in. You know, there's kind of fun things throughout this that might set you apart from some of your competitors. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and we are going to dive right in with Brett here talking about asphalt shingle roofs. Brett, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's go. What's that?
I said I've been ready.
Been ready. Yeah, we've had this one on the books for a couple weeks, right? A few weeks.
Yeah.
All right. So, Brett, you've told us a little bit about yourself, and I do want to dive in and talk about these roofs. So I'm going to pull up a picture real quick for those of you that are on here. Thank you for waiting. Share screen. All right. Now, this here is an asphalt shingle roof. We're going to get to this one in a little bit. We'll start right up here. As you can see, we have plenty of slides to go through. And let's make this one slideshow. All right. So there's the asphalt shingle roof. Brett, there's a lot of times that we're going to have to get new roofs put on the house here, right? Sure. What are we looking for? And tell me what some of your thoughts are. Tell me if I missed something here. One of the things that I've learned to look for is cupping. Now you can see with these shingles that the shingles have actually started to create like a cup, and if water were to pour on those, it might actually puddle up in some of these little spaces right here. Another one is delaminating some of that gravel that you see on top of that, or you see little holes on here for like hail damage. I've even put some on here like cracking, delaminated edges. When I'm knocking doors, when I'm standing outside, or if you've got appointments before you go into home, it is not difficult just to take a glance up and look at the rooftop up there and see if you see any of these signs. Brett, do you have anything to tell us about cupping? How does that happen?
Well, first of all, one thing I would say is, when you're walking up to a house, one of the first things you might want to look for on a composition shingle roof is the number of layers of shingles that are on that roof. I've personally been in situations where I sold jobs as a solar salesperson, and the previous roofing company did a really good job of hiding the fact that they did not remove the previous layer. And we got through almost to our final site visit, and then we discovered that, oh man, that there's another layer on this roof. We can't install on this without a complete re-roof. And even though that roof the new roof was not even that old, it was in good condition. For me, unfortunately, at the time, that killed that deal for me. This is many years ago. So that's like one simple. Go to the rake on the side of the house and see if you can notice whether there's 1, 2, or even 3 layers of shingles. And it depends, on the age of the roof, right? I mean, I think the industry standard tends to be around that 10-year mark, right? There's a lot of installers. If it's 1 layer of shingles and it's a quality shingle, like a GAF, Certainty, and they have good warranties on it, and it's in good quality, good condition, that, they might stretch that a little bit. Could be 12, maybe 15, depending upon the inspection and how flashings looked. But specifically for, the issues that you're talking about, they potentially can actually be like warrantyable claims for that homeowner. So,
well, before we keep going, you've said a few terms. GAF is one of them. For those that didn't know, that's actually a brand of shingle.
Correct.
Another one is drip edge. There's quite a bit that you went through. Before we keep going on with that, you mentioned that multiple layers might be a problem, and that's something that we might need to look out for. But don't some states allow installation of these panels even with 2 layers of shingles?
Yeah, it depends. Being on the racking side, one of the challenges for us and installers is the wide variety of interpretations of building code from one town to the next. You could be
from town to town, not even state to state, huh?
No, not yet. Absolutely. Like you could be in a town in Arizona, they don't even require a permit potentially, or they're on NEC 2011 still and haven't updated.
For a new roof. So a new roof does require a permit or it does not? Depends on what city you're in, what town you're in?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. But I'm just saying for solar installations, there are towns, AHJs, that don't require a permit. It's just a simple submittal and a system design. So, and then you can be in another town, even right next to it, where it's a very strict interpretation of the code, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth and long delays in that.
Understood. So I want to show you something that he did talk about. It's a term called drip edge. And if you don't know what that is, it is right here. Basically what it is, it's an L-shaped metal bracket that goes against the fascia. That's that bottom wood part, and goes onto and clips onto the roof. It's an L shape like that. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Brett, but what you're talking about is you might even be able to see this drip edge from the bottom, and it might look like there's one layer up there. So you have an installer come back to you and says, hey, we need a new roof because there's multiple layers on that roof. And you said, no, sir. I looked at that. I took photos. Here it is. There's the drip edge. There's the single layer. Here's something kind of sneaky that happens. Homeowners want to save money. Brett, correct me anytime here. Absolutely. Homeowners want to save money, and instead of doing a full tear off, that means tearing off the existing roof that's on there, taking all the nails out, throwing it at a dump, disposing of it properly, hopefully. What they're doing, that's a roof removal, and instead of doing that, they go the less expensive route, and that's taking a whole new order of shingles and placing it on top of the existing shingles. Contractors do not like this if they're going to be installing on the roofs, and we'll get into that. Brett, I want you to answer that. But let me finish this thought here. So if there's multiple layers of shingles on that roof and a new roofer comes in with new shingles and they place them on top of there and just start putting on there, even if it's the most beautiful installation you've seen, and they cover those other layers with drip edge and then place those shingles on top, it may only look like there is one layer of shingles on that roof. There is one person that typically knows how many layers are on that roof. And it's kind of like pulling a memory out of the dark abyss of our minds, but they know. That's your homeowner. Ask your homeowner, do you have multiple layers of shingles on that roof? They will know, because they will go back to the time when they talk to that contractor and the contractor says, hey, we could just add another layer on top. It's less expensive if you want to do that. They made that choice and they made that decision. This is where cupping comes from. Typically is when you're laying a layer of shingle on top of other shingles, you already know that there's likely other asphalt shingle layers underneath that. But before I keep going, Brett, tell us a little bit more about this, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, to be honest, I don't think, best practice in the roofing industry is generally, strip that roof, start with a new underlayment, and, ice and water shields, to the standard that's required. And a lot of installers, roofing installers will do even more than what's required. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with, and it's one of the advantages of shingles over tile and metal and other options is, you can put another layer on that roof. It doesn't create a tremendous amount of risk if you're a homeowner, but it does create a problem for the solar installer. And the reason for that is, if you can imagine, most of your solar sales guys at least know that, you're putting in LP, you're putting in attachments, and you're sending lag bolts typically or screws into your rafters, trying to hit your rafters as best you can. And that creates a compression, right? And so if there's one layer of shingle, that pressure is generally not going to damage those shingles over time, right? It's not going to cut or stamp out a hole in that shingle, especially when you have metal flashings and butyl and whatnot. But if there's another layer of shingles, you've now added this like sandwich of shingles. And when you compress those fasteners, you're compressing that roofing system. And then that does create the risk that you're, stamping and breaking into that. And it also over time, that compression will loosen up, and you may not have the tightness on your fasteners and the tightness on your water seal that you want. So to clarify, it's not the worst thing in the world as an option for homeowners, but for solar installers, it's pretty risky to be installing your mounts on more than one layer of shingle.
Makes sense. David, any questions from you so far?
No, not on that. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, good. All right. So next one I have up on the screen as well. So we did talk a little bit about cupping. That's one over here on the far left where you see like little cups forming inside of these shingles. Brett, we also have these like the delaminating of this gravelly type stuff that goes on the shingle. What can you tell us about that? How does that happen?
Yeah, so like over time, depending upon location. So I lived in Arizona for 10 years, as we were talking about earlier. And, a common roofing system in Arizona is going to be a concrete tile. And the reasons for that is your extreme heat and the extreme dryness and the huge amount of like UV light that those roofs are going to get. So concrete and clay tile systems to a certain degree are ideal in those environments because they don't VOC, they don't gas off, right? So any type of like, carbon-based product, asphalt, shingle has, crude oil byproduct, what makes it hydrophobic, but there's a certain amount of that material that is gassing off at all times. And the more sun and UV that those shingles are getting, the more that those oils that are in the product that are added to the fiberglass sheets, they start to lose their kind of like chemical properties, and they're going to start to curl and cut. And yeah, I mean, that's a really good example. Like if I was in the Northeast, and it's moderate sun, but it's a lot of moisture and it's ice and things like that, this would be indicative of like a pretty old roof or a pretty low quality shingle product is what I would expect if I'm seeing that. Being in a really sunny environment like Arizona, Las Vegas, if it's the reason they generally don't use as much asphalt, but it could just be a symptom of the extreme environment that roof is in. And it's a much cheaper option than tile or metal. And we're definitely seeing some interesting trends and changes in choices for consumers on different materials. But, there's a tremendous amount of advantages, I think, still with asphalt shingles in general, no matter where you are, honestly.
Well, so let me ask you. So I guess let me say this to the audience here. Asphalt shingle roofs have warranties on them from the installer themselves, or they have the workmanship warranty. If they're going to go in and penetrate those roofs, they make them watertight. We've all probably heard of or been with a company that has not made it watertight, but they're supposed to make it watertight. And in these contracts, it says they're going to do it for a duration of time, whatever that may be, for the organization that you work with. I would certainly look into that. Some of the new PPA products or TPO products, meaning third-party ownership leases or PPAs, are even stating something like that they will warranty the roof for the duration of the time that they have it. Even so, if the roofer put a roof on there, they put their own warranty on it. They put their warranty on it, and the TPO product contracts are beginning to say that they will honor the same warranty that the roofer gave, even if the roofer stops that warranty because we penetrated the roof. What are your thoughts on that, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important topic for your sales listeners to know, and it makes it important that when you're working with a residential EPC, that they have solid relationships with roofers. It's a natural relationship, or previously were a roofer, or have absorbed a roofing company into their business. I think a lot of those types of companies can offer that assurance that the homeowner at the end of the day, and you as a sales rep, because when there are problems, the homeowner is going to probably call you as a sales rep at some point.
Yeah.
And if you're deciding where you want to work, or what EPC you're going to work with, it's important to know that they have strong warranties, because the truth of the matter is, on asphalt shingles, the manufacturing warranties are shopped when you install solar. That is a fact.
They're shopped, you mean? Is that what you said?
No, like they're shopped. They're gone.
Okay, they're gone.
Yeah. So whether it is these companies like Certainty,
You're
or
saying the manufacturer's warranty, like the actual composition shingle, is it's voided when we install solar. Some of the asphalt shingle warranties, I at least I've heard rumors of this, and thank you for being on to clear this up. I've heard rumors that as long as you are using a specific product, the manufacturers, there's 4 products that the manufacturers will say, okay, use that brand, use that product, we will honor our warranty still. Yeah.
So this is really getting at the heart of the question. Is that new construction, or is that a retrofitted application? Right?
What's the difference?
So new construction is when you replace that roof and you're installing, right? So companies like Certainty is a good example. They have a new program where, if you're using one of their approved flashing products, and these are all of I don't call them legacy, but standard flashing products on comp shingle. It's usually a 10, 12, by 8 flashing. It's metal, it's aluminum, it's galvanized. And that slides in between your shingles. That's an approved flashing for a new roof install, right? But as a lot of your sales guys know, doing a new roof can be a major objection, and it's the reason why they don't sell a lot of solar projects. You go to a homeowner, they got a 12-year-old roof. The installer is saying, yeah, they need a new roof, or we can't have our standard warranty or extended warranty on that. Then you're going back to the homeowner and saying, well, you need to buy a new roof in order to maintain a warranty on your install. And so when you do that, the manufacturer's warranties are intact, but I would say the majority of solar sales and installs are on retrofit, meaning you're not changing out the existing shingle roof that's there. And so, to be honest, the truth is that they're not really any of the manufacturers that uphold their warranties. And you ask any installer, and they'll admit, yeah, man, when we do solar, we own that roof. We own the manufacturer and the workmanship warranty on that roof. It's on us now. That's been a consistent message that I've heard for many, many years.
Okay. Is there any solace we can give the industry? Because we all know what's happening in our solar industry right now. For example, we just saw a Titan fall. So we've seen an Empire fall. So what is happening with these roofs, these warranties? They just don't work anymore? The roof warranty, the penetration warranty?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? If your provider, goes out of business, you're in a situation where you need help. There's actually a lot of companies that are popping up that provide service, and they help with roof changes where there's solar on the roof and you got to remove the panels, and you got to put the roofing down. It can be pretty expensive. And, I don't want to be like all doom and gloom about it. The vast majority of, solar installs that are done properly don't leak. And, in the racking space and in the flashing space, we're not just us, a lot of the racking companies are inventing really, really innovative new products that make installing mounts easier, faster, and more importantly, more reliable.
And I definitely want to hear about those innovative products coming out. I have that on our list, but do those innovative products still allow the manufacturer to maintain their warranty, or do those also void the manufacturer warranty?
They all do.
They all do.
So again, going back to your original question, which was, new construction, new roof versus retrofit. There are roofing manufacturers that will uphold their warranty on a new roof install. And, many years ago, and there's still contractors that do this, where, you have an opportunity when your shingles are off and you have your sheathing down, you have your paper and your ice and water shield down, And you can put, standoffs in at that time where your mounts are supposed to be. And then you can put typically like an OD flashing. I don't know if you're familiar with that style of flashing product, but it's a large metal flashing that has a rubber boot seal around it that seals a post. OD is a really common roof flashing product for vent pipes and things like that. And so that's a trusted, approved flashing method and product for a lot of roofers. And so if you're an installer and you're working with your roofing company, you can re-roof, and then you can put these types of products down, and you can install these flashings, and then those flashings can be trimmed properly as per roofing installation required. Like I did say, there are some companies, like CertainTeed is one, that'll allow your standard metal 8x10 flashing as well, that is installed after the roof is down, and they will approve and uphold their warranty.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we do. I have several questions. Oh, did you want to finish something? Sorry, Brett. I'm going to cut you off.
Oh, yeah. What I was going to say, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that, to be honest, whether it is, a standard metal flashing, like an 8x10, or it's some of the newer products that all racking companies are now coming out with that use butyl or sealants, that, both options generally on a retrofit, which is probably 80% of the installs on comp shingle that are happening, are transferring that liability to your solar installer. It both do. So for solar installers, they're really trying to look at, okay, well, what works best? What prevents the most amount of leaks?
Right.
And I'll be honest, like, the traditional metal flashings that have been kind of a standard in the industry for many years aren't necessarily preventing leaks as well as these newer products for many reasons that are, worth talking about.
I would love to talk about those, and I do plan on talking about them here soon. I wanted to get back to a statement that you made about these different states and the way that they the heat. Then we have some questions from Matthew Mitchell. Matthew, thank you for typing some questions in. We'll get to those in just a moment. So I want these sales reps, everyone on here, to understand and know. I live in San Diego, and it rains here probably, I don't know, 3 days of the year. It's an exaggeration, but that's very different. I mean, it's close. It's not that much. I think it rains a total of like an inch here in a year. And so our roofs, and it's not that hot either. I'd say the hottest where I live on the coast, I'd say the hottest it gets is probably 80 degrees, which is a very different type of situation that I've been hearing about in Arizona this last week, where they were reaching temperatures of 118, 120 degrees. And can have these massive amounts of flash floods come in because rain comes and all sorts of craziness happens. There's even East Coast roofs that have snow that piles up on top of them, right?
Sure.
Or not just East Coast, all across the country. But all of these different types of weather happen, yet an installer has the same warranty across the board. What is the reason? What is the thinking behind that, do you think, Brett?
When you say an installer, you're talking about a solar installer having the same type of warranty across the board, depending upon location and roofing type?
Yeah, there's different weather. There's different situations that happen. There's different temperatures that are happening in these different states. Yet, I think a roof needs to be replaced in San Diego a lot less frequently than it has to be replaced in, say, Arizona.
Yeah, so it depends, right? So as we were talking about earlier, I lived in Arizona. I had a concrete tile roof myself. I installed solar on that roof, and those roofs are chosen because they do hold up better in those types of environments. You do have comp shingle roofs in Arizona, and I was on a roof with an install crew, a bunch of years ago. It was only like 80 degrees out that day, ambient, but we were walking on that roof, and it was hot enough on the roof surface that just walking on the roof was starting to, pull and deform like the asphalt. It's not tar, because tar comes from coal, but it's like the asphalt crude oil byproduct that is like the goopy glue that they add the the granules too. So even on like a moderately warm day, like 80 degrees in Arizona is nothing. It was starting to mess the roof up a little bit, just having an install crew on there. But if you're an installer, I mean, generally speaking, if you're following best practices, right? So I think that's the big difference with this, because we talked a little bit about code compliance, but to be honest, the code that's written is really difficult for any solar installer to comply with. And like I had mentioned, that code, I do believe, is really referencing new construction anyway. It's not referencing your retrofit application. So if you're trying to stick to this interpretation of a code that's not really written for a retrofitted application, you're starting to take products like metal flashings and you're trying to force them into a application that they really weren't optimized for. And I'll expand upon this because this is really important. And this is the reason for a big trend in this change over time, is that if you're on a market like Texas, huge market, it's like the top market residentially in the country now. It's the vast majority is composition shingle roofs, and it's hot. Those types of roofs those shingle courses are really sticking together. And, in the Northeast, it's not so much the case, although there's reasons this is changing. But, you take a metal flashing and you try to get it in between, the first thing you're doing is taking a pry bar and you're like ripping those shingles apart. And that takes kind of takes a technique, and it's not easy. You're popping nails out. And, especially as the industry has been growing so fast, maintaining your training with your install crews on how to do that properly without totally tearing up those shingles is really challenging. And so this is one of the reasons we've really seen a shift in installers adopting our newer style products, because those metal flashings, while technically they meet code compliance per the word, are very difficult to do properly, especially on comp shingle roofs that are in some of these more extreme weather conditions. I know I didn't really answer your question directly in terms of the warranties, but this is really
it's
getting
okay.
at the
I'm
heart
getting
of
a
the
feeling
challenge.
like you want to talk about your product. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and talk about these questions that they have. Then we'll go to your product, and then we'll go to the rest of it. You down?
Yeah.
We actually have a video for K2 as well, so I want to show that to you all. Matthew Mitchell said something pretty interesting. So he said that there's a brand out there. We talked about GAF. Another very popular one is Owens Corning, right? And something interesting about these different brands, I don't know if this is still the case, but a few years ago when I was selling, Owens Corning had different levels of warranties that they placed on these shingles, depending on the installer. And if the installer was certified to a certain degree, instead of having a 20-year warranty on the exact same product, they would have a 50-year warranty on it, or a lifetime warranty, they called it. I believe those two are interchangeable. So Matthew came on and said something. He said this. You can become an Owens Corning certified installer for solar and keep the warranties. Have you heard about this?
Yes. And actually, I appreciate that question because I kind of misspoke. Owens Corning is the brand that does have these levels of warranties. So there's kind of two things that Mitchell's bringing up, which is you have your standard warranties that roofing installers get, and GAF has something similar where you could be like a master elite level GAF installer, and you have up to a 50-year warranty that you can offer to your clients, and they only offer that to like less than 1% of their roofers. And so, yes, Owens Corning has come out with a product or a warranty where if you use approved flashing products on new construction, this is as I understand it, on new construction, not retrofits, that you maintain the warranty of the roof, even with the solar attachments. So again, we're kind of going back to that same challenging gray area, which is it a new construction, meaning not like a whole new building, but it means like, did you remove everything, resheet it, new ice and water, brand new shingles, and then are you using those products? That is a warranty with Owens Corning that's maintained. If you're not doing that, and let's say it's a 5-year-old roof or a 7-year-old roof, where that's a pretty typical retrofitted aged roof, where an installer will install on it and they'll maintain their solar attachment warranty, which can extend anywhere from typically 10 to sometimes even as much as 30 years if it's an extended warranty for the solar installer. I don't believe, and what I've been told in my understanding is that warranty is not in place.
I like that. Thank you for answering that. One of the things I used to do as a sales rep, is I used to talk to my homeowners when they needed a re-roof, and I would sell the roof. I would sell the roof. I didn't find it too difficult to do that because we were already in the home for solar. And typically they already know that they need a new roof. The ones that get shocked are the ones that are that you would expect to get shocked. You can tell usually when you're talking with them. But I will say one of my bullets in my chamber was that I would say that we used a roofer that had a 50-year Owens Corning warranty, or warranty. Some roofers don't. They're not certified for it, and I use that as a bullet in my chamber to close these projects. So now it needs to go a step further. You're saying it needs to not only just be Owens Corning. We also have to make sure that we're utilizing the proper flashing material, the proper stanchions in order to have that same bullet in my chamber. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
At least for that particular manufacturer. Yeah.
I love that. That's incredible to know. You've also said some other terms that I've written down that I want everyone to understand as well. Icy roof, for example. So let's do this. Let's take a small break and go to the video that Brett supplied for us. K2 has been a sponsor at SolarCon for many years. Thank you very much. I say many, we've only done it 3, but they are going to be again the next year. And we are very happy and excited to have K2 here. We're excited to have Brett here. But what is K2 all about? Brett, what is K2?
Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity to be on the podcast. And we've gone to your trade show every year. It's a phenomenal trade show. And I was telling you earlier, we made a lot of great connections at the last SolarCon. It's a really fun, and it's kind of nice to have a show that actually specifically is for the solar sales guys, right? Which hasn't always been the case in the past. But for those of the audience that don't know, K2 actually in North America was previously known as Everest Solar Systems, and we still have to kind of remind people of that. The reason for that is our parent company, K2 Systems. I was just at their office in Germany a few weeks back, and they were founded in 2004. So we're going on 20-year anniversary of our company. We're one of the, if not the largest residential racking manufacturer globally, right in that space. We're not talking utility scale, but like in the space that your audience is generally operating in. So we've been in business for 20 years. We're approaching close to $1 billion in annual revenue as a privately held racking manufacturer. And K2 Systems, or previously Everest Solar Systems, is based in San Diego. We've been in that office since 2012. The only reason that we had the separate or the different name was there was another company like in the Bay Area that was called K2 Systems, and they were a solar company. So it took us a little while to get access to the trademark. So we do now, but we've always been the same company. So we operate, pretty independently in the United States. We have our own product development, as you have me on. I run product development here now, after having been on the sales side for many years. We're German engineering, high quality, high level of service for our customers. And, I like to think that, we're very customer focused, right? So, for example, me even being on the PD team is a good example of I've interviewed thousands of solar installers in my life, whether that's a business owner, an ops manager, an installer. And, we really value that feedback. And, we really want to make products and offer services that add value to the installer, to the business owner, and most importantly, to the sales rep. So that when you walk in that house, you feel confident in that, yeah, we use K2. This is a really good German engineered, privately held, stable business that'll continue to make really innovative products for us for, the rest of your career, or as long as we're doing so. So that's who K2 is. And I've been here for 8 years this last summer and love working at K2. It's a really great environment, and it's got an amazing culture.
It does sound like they have an amazing culture and they take care of their clients, because why else would you be on here, right? Not every company needs to have somebody that goes on to a little show like this for us little salespeople. And
everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah, and expand your knowledge like this. Is very kind of you guys to do this, and we are thankful. So, Sean, are you there? Can you play a video that K2 sent in for us real quick?
3, 2, 1.
Here we go.
3, 2, 1.
Oh man, you guys are on all the social media platforms, even TikTok. Talk about being the new company, new cutting edge company. I mean, you're not new, but appealing to all of us younger people. I'm categorizing myself in that I'm 41 years old. So if anyone has any opposition to me being young, you can word that with me after. Just kidding. Here we go. So I want to start diving into some of the terms that we have. All right. So up first, we have tongue and groove. I made the mistake of trying to act cool and called this TNG to a roofer. They had no idea what I was talking about. But tongue and groove plywood. This is very important for asphalt shingle roofs. This is not on every roof type. Typically, the lighter roof types, like what are those? Stone coated steel is one of them. Wood shake is a lighter one. Clay tile might even be out there, Spanish clay. But we need to have this tongue and groove. We need to have this plywood underneath asphalt shingle. Why is that, Brett?
Oh, well, it's kind of a loaded question. Tongue and groove plywood, traditionally is used on that could be a roof, but those are TGI beams that are underneath those, which are kind of manufactured wood I-beams, if you're looking at that. And tongue and groove obviously is a type of plywood that's designed to interlock, and so it creates a lot more strength between the plywood sheets. It prevents any kind of shifting that can happen over time. Typically, you're going to spec that for a lot of times, like flooring is where it's used most commonly. The most common type of roofing sheeting is what we call OSB, which is like glued board. Yeah, that's pretty standard. Where you start to see things like plywood and then even tongue and groove plywood is in really extreme weather conditions. So you might see that like down in Florida, for example, right around the Orlando mark, I want to say, if I'm looking at the most recent ASCE map. They have a wind hazard map that you can look up to see what the average wind speed that you have to design to is around 150, is like right in the middle of the state. And then as you get further south towards Miami, that increases to 160, 170, 180, and then there's like, exposure categories above that. And all that means is there's just a hell of a lot more wind. And the construction code starts speccing something like a plywood tongue and groove. So you go from like a very common OSB sheathing is 7/16 OSB. It's probably it is the most common material that's used because it's fairly inexpensive and it's still pretty rigid. And then when you get into those really extreme weather conditions, you'll start to see 15, 30 seconds, half inch, and then even 3/4 inch ply. And then, for the high quality premium builders, they'll start using things like tongue and groove. So to be honest, it's not that common to see it. But if that's there, that's fantastic. That's really good.
Tongue and groove is higher end then for organizations to use.
Yeah,
and it's used for higher wind. Okay. I thought
sometimes it's actually built into the code. And then sometimes it's the choice of higher quality premium contractors as well.
There's a correction right there. Thank you, Brett. You just saved the book. You just saved my backside. Thank you very much. As always, anyone in the audience, feel free to ask any questions as well. Some of my questions might not be as entertaining as yours, so feel free to do that.
Well, you're bringing up a pretty good topic too. I mean, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but when it comes to asphalt, shingles, and plywood and OSB, a pretty substantial trend right now is the difference between a rafter attachment and a deck attachment. And maybe 5-10 years ago, if you said, "Hey, we're going to use mounts that are totally deck attached," meaning they're not hitting rafters. Right. They're relying on that sheeting, whether it's OSB or ply or tongue and groove ply. That would be frowned upon heavily. And, in a lot of circles still is. But that has been a major interesting trend in the last, especially 5 years, is the willingness of a lot of solar contractors to go down that road. And it does actually depending upon the quality and the condition of that roofing system, it does eliminate some risk, I believe, going to a deck attached fastener and mounting system as opposed to a rafter. Depends upon the situation. Got to be designed correctly.
Gotcha. Well, before I move on to the next topic, I did mention something. You cannot have the weight of these asphalt shingle roofs is too great to have on any roof. There's some roofs where the trusses inside of those, or I believe you're calling them rafters, Brett, where the trusses inside of those or the rafters are too far apart to sustain the weight of composition shingles. So let's say you come across a wood shake roof and the homeowner wants a re-roof. You can't necessarily just say, just take the wood shake down and put up asphalt shingle. You would have to make certain that, from what Brett is saying, you would have to comply with the builder code in that town, and you have to get the correct size thickness of that plywood that would go underneath. Plywood does need to be there in order to install asphalt. Is that right, Brett?
100%. And actually, you're bringing up a really good example. When I was selling solar, I was on Long Island, the Hamptons, and there's a lot of wood shake roofs in that market, right? Really fancy, 10,000 square foot, really expensive homes with like beautiful finished cedar shake roofs. Actually, most of those roofs, I don't want to say most, many of those roofs are need to breathe, right? So those cedar shake shingles don't typically have any sheeting under them because of moisture, right? So those shingles will get wet. They're made of, a light style of wood like cedar. Cedar's pretty water resistant type of strain of wood, but there's generally not going to be a sheathing under there at all. And to your point, even the framing of those roof systems, if it's for cedar shake, haven't been engineered or designed specifically for that weight of shingles. So that is an example of like I've done jobs where we did do cedar shake, and we flashed the cedar shake roof, and we did not replace it with asphalt. But you're bringing kind of a unique scenario up where, I think that would be something as a sales rep. If you're walking up to a house that has cedar on it, that's going to be a tricky sale. There's going to be some challenges to that roofing system and getting it code compliant for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. Weight, my friends, weight is a big factor of what you can put on top of these houses and the distance between those trusses. So if you are at a home that has a very lightweight material, stone coated metal, wood shake, or clay tile, rest assured you're likely not going to be able to put asphalt shingle on there. And that is probably why your installer might be DQing it, is because it can't sustain the weight of the new material. For any of those of you that have had DQ jobs for that reason, it is true. So here's some other things to look for. I know we did kind of brush over some of these other ones, and I'm going to keep going. But cupping there on the left is one that you can look for a roof replacement. Another one is delaminating of that gravel. Typically in heat, like Brett was saying, people can walk around on those things in the heat, and when it gets in Arizona 120 degrees and your foot is on that and it slips, you're tearing that gravel apart. If you have a composition shingle roof in Arizona, that bottom one is hail damage. You can see all those round circles that are hitting that shingle. Cracked roofs. I haven't even gone into that, but I would love to learn about cracked roofs. But on the edges on the middle picture here, you can see some of the edges beginning to laminate from the side. When you see discoloration like this from the sides or the edges of these things, when you're walking into that home and you look up, if you see any of this type of stuff, rest assured you're likely going to need a new roof.
One thing that I would add to that, though, is depending upon the warranty of that roofing system, you may partner up with a roofing company, and there are definitely like warrantyable insurance claims that can be made on these types of roofs, right? So if you're talking to a homeowner and they have a pretty damaged looking roof, like tears, cupping, delaminating, things that are happening and the homeowner's like, it's like maybe 12 years old. You may actually have a roofing system that you can file an insurance claim on, and they can get a new roof for free through that insurance claim.
I would love if sales reps did this. One hindrance, and it's a sad one. And if you're listening to this, please do not want to be one of these sales reps. Brett, how long does it take for that insurance process to go through? And what promises should we make on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? So it would be, partial, it could be a partial. If you're a solar salesperson and, you want to lock in your deal, you're definitely adding a little bit of a delay for sure.
But it's
Into
but it's
clarity.
okay. That's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, are you ready to elevate your brand in the solar industry? Join us at SolarCon, the largest residential solar conference. Take advantage of discounted sponsorships and showcase your brand to thousands of industry professionals. Plus, get discounted tickets to attend and network with the brightest minds in the solar industry. Do not miss the opportunity to be part of the premier event in solar. Visit attendsolarcon.com to secure your spot today.
Yeah, without a doubt. But yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, it could add a substantial amount of time for inspections and going back and forth. I will say that there are, roofing companies that have experience in that can assist with that process. So it kind of depends upon who your roofing partner might be.
Yeah, and when you're all dealing with roofers, just side subject here, if you are trying to get it done through the insurance, roofers are trying to do that daily. You've heard of ambulance chasers of lawyers. There's also ambulance type of chasers. They're gonna kill me if I say this. They call them storm chasers. When there's a big storm that happens and hail's coming down, rest assured you have 15 people knocking on that door for hail damage for insurance on a roof. But these adjusters are so used to these roofers coming to them and claiming that it needs a new roof that they take time studying it and understanding it. And sometimes they don't cover all of it. Sometimes it's a partial. And so if you do go the proper route and do what's best for your homeowner and try to get them the least expensive pricing, just know it could take some time, but that's okay because we're not in this necessarily to do a one and done type of deal. We're out here for referral based business and great reviews. So taking that extra time with your homeowner might be the might be the distinguishing factor between you and a competitor. The fact that you're willing to take that time and get the price point as low as you possibly can and work with their roofers is a very good way to gain trust of your homeowner and have them trust that you are the right person to do solar with. Before moving on, Matt or Brett, I know we're taking a lot of your time right now. You did ask in the beginning if it was okay to keep going Joe Rogan style. Are you okay to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
I got
So Matthew,
a quick question.
yeah, David, go ahead.
The warranties you mentioned earlier, manufacturer's warranties, 25-year, 50-year. Could you explain what that actually means? Like, what does a manufacturer's warranty even mean?
Well, I'll give it in layman's term. The manufacturer has a product that they've developed, and they want to stand by that product just like any other product does. They have a warranty on it. Sometimes you're checking out at Target and scan something, and you can add an additional year warranty. The manufacturer has a warranty on their product, and if you do see delamination or you see this gravel coming off or you see certain things, then you can essentially call in and get a prorated amount for however long you've had it. They'll determine it's up to them. But Brett, tell us a little bit more.
Well, yeah. So depending upon the manufacturer, they'll break their warranty up into different categories, right? So there might be, like premature delamination is an example, right? They might cover that for 20 years, or they might cover like a wind damage type event for a fixed amount of time. Typically, that's more like 25. But there are warranties that go up to 50 years. But as time goes on, like you said, that's a prorated amount. And it really depends upon what the damage is. And if there was a storm, specifically like an act of God or something, that a lot of times that's a little bit of a loophole, but it does depend upon the exact type of damage that has been seen. So, yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've not ever seen a comp shingle roof go 50 years. I mean, that's a really long period of time, but it's not impossible on the presidential or architectural level shingles that are extremely thick and they have a lot of material in them. But the newer style, this is kind of important. The newer style shingles that are being manufactured are starting to use fiberglass sheet as its base material, and so that fiberglass sheet gets manufactured, and then your asphalt material and your granules get placed on that. In the past, it might be paper or some type of treated paper, and so that is lasting a lot longer and prevents things like tearing and stuff like that. So,
Right on. David, he answer your question?
He did, and I guess to piggyback off that, made me think of something else. I don't know if this is the proper spot for this, but I've seen these companies coming out with these products where you can spray the roof with this chemical compound that adds 5 years, to the life of the roof. What do you think about those products? And as far as maybe doing it on jobs with solar and some of these homeowners that don't necessarily want to do a complete re-roof, maybe using one of these products where they spray it and, it gives it an extra 5 or so years.
And Matthew and Drew will get to you right after this.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I think that's a really great option, especially if you're in, that kind of gray zone on the age of the roof, so your roofing contractor, you're going to say, hey, this is a 12-year-old roof, and they're going to want to see some pictures. They're going to want to know how the soffits and how the ridge cap looks. They're going to want to see some flashing, see if there's any sort of like degradation, or because it's, when you talk about roofing, asphalt roofing systems, it's not just the shingle, right? A lot of leaks happen, around your valleys, around areas where there are metal flashings between transitions, things like the ridge cap where it's completely open and it's vented. But, those systems are where water tends to find its way through. The actual shingles themselves generally hold up pretty well, actually. So I think that's a great idea. It really comes down to your roofing installer, and if they believe in that treatment as a way to add some longevity, and they want to be, if they're willing to make an exception if that treatment's applied. I don't know. I haven't come across a roofing contractor or solar installer that has done that, but it's a really interesting potential option to offer.
Thank you very much, Brett. Matthew has something he wanted to add to that. We just put it up here. To clarify the Owens Corning solar warranty, it needs to be on a new install or within 60 days of the install of Owens Corning will cover the detach and reset cost of labor and materials within 50 years of that shingles fail. Drew goes on to say, what are your thoughts on a partial re-roof to only hit roof sections that will be installed on as opposed to a full re-roof?
Yeah, I think that's a really great option. The only drawbacks can be depending upon the sections of the roof is like just the discoloration, trying to match the colors of the roofing. I mean, as a solar salesperson, the homeowner is going to be most homeowners are going to be pretty fairly green to the process and the risks and what it takes to actually do the install. So they're thinking primarily like, what am I going to save? Is my roof going to leak? What does it look like? What are the aesthetics of this? Those are the primary questions that they're going to have. And I do think it's a perfectly viable option, right? Because the cost of doing a detached reset can be substantial. We're talking thousands of dollars, in the future. If you install on a roof and it's 12 years old and then, it doesn't hold up and you're starting to have leaks and the shingles are starting to degrade, and you need a roof, it's just a substantial investment to do that at a later date. So,
Drew, I do want to add to that because the point of this is for solar sales, right? And is your installer telling something accurate or are they not? Let me say this on partial roofs. I've heard, like Matthew said in that, I'll just put it back up on the screen here. I've heard this where it's fine as long as you're doing the entire roof plane. Sometimes on these partial roofs, let's say that we have an array that we put up and it only takes up half of the roof. I have seen installers say that they're comfortable with that as long as they're going 3 feet past where the array ends. That way, they know that all of the new shingle that it puts on there was their work. And in case the wind decides to blow that rain sideways or that water sideways, that they have some protection on all sides. I've also heard some roofers say that it must be the entire plane because they don't want to take that risk. And I've also heard roofers say it's the entire plane plus 3 feet on the adjacent side of those roof planes. And I've heard some roofers say that it must be the entire roof, and you're an idiot if you do otherwise. And so to answer your question, Drew, every roofer has their opinions. Every installer has their opinions. The safest is obviously doing the full roof, but I would say that it is completely up to your installer and what they're comfortable with and what type of risk they're willing to take on with damage to that roof or what may happen in the future. Because as Brett put on there, as Brett stated on this call, your installer is on the hook for that for the next 25 years sometimes, however long their warranty may be. But it is completely up to the risk factor of your installer, and we cannot be frustrated at them. We can't get mad at them for saying they're only comfortable doing a partial roof, or they want to do 3 feet on the adjacent side, or they want to do the whole roof. We can't be mad at our installers for that, because we don't own their company. And if their kids wake up on Christmas morning not able to open presents because they went bankrupt fixing so many of these things, it's not our call. We have to say, okay, yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. We'll do it this way. If you don't like it, then leave the company. But fighting them on this is, you can have a conversation with them. And I have changed the minds of some installers. Say, hey, here's the situation with the helm. Could you please just approve this one? And they might take some risk on here or there. But certainly, and I'm not accusing you of this, Drew, but certainly we can't be frustrated if they've set their policies. Brett, what do you say to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's really well stated. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. Best practice really is to try to at least cover that entire plane plus a little bit, because you're correct. At the end of the day, I would say the vast majority, in my experience talking to a lot of installers and detached reset guys too, service guys, is the vast majority of leak claims are not related to the solar at all, right? It's something else with that roofing system. I mean, I even had a customer one time. They had a family of raccoons in their attic, and they were just like going to the bathroom in their attic, and that was what was actually leaking. But if you got a homeowner and they got a leak somewhere after the install, they're calling you as that solar company first. And whether it was actually related to your attachments or not, you're going to be asked to explain and investigate. And so, you're right. From a risk standpoint, it's the best is to do a complete re-roof. But at a minimum, I would say the roof plane is the correct approach, and will aesthetically look the best as well.
Yeah, I agree. I have so many things to show all of you. Let's see here. Some of the terms that we heard Brett talk about, and I have plenty of things to go over with you. Before I do all of that, though, here's an example, because Brett just mentioned it. If you do a roof plane, now this is a drastic example, but you could actually get the same exact color shingle. You could order the same shingle color, but you might notice differences like this. This is probably the same shingle color from the manufacturer. Brett, why does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's just weathering. Just like anything else that sits outside in the sun and the cold and the rain, it's going to fade. So that's one of the challenges of doing a partial roof, is this exact example.
Yeah, is this here? And aside just from weathering, these shingles, when you order the shingles, yes, you have the bag that you've seen that you can carry on your shoulders and place up there. You've seen those, but they also come in batches. They actually have batch numbers associated with these shingles, and sometimes, although it is the same color, a different batch might have a different shade of that same color. And so it's important for these roofers to order from the same batch. Otherwise, you might also get something like this. So much like that cement I showed you in the beginning, much like this picture is illustrating now, if you do a partial roof plane, you may run the risk of not getting the identical color match as well. Brett?
That's totally true, right? So, and that goes really to like even distribution, right? So we sell our products through distribution, keeping track of lot numbers and batches of products. There's always going to be some slight deviations. You have new additives that you add to improve the performance over time. And as much as a lot of manufacturers try to, there's going to be a challenge in maintaining like the precise exact mixture of whatever that color might be. So that's also a very important reason why it might not be the best option.
I personally love when all of you start commenting and interacting on this. I'm going to go to Dennis, and then I want to jump from Dennis's comment. I want to jump all the way over to Brett's product that he was talking about. That Brett, you say it's changing. In the last 5 years, there's been a lot of change with flashing, and it's actually helping with some of these leaks and some of the better practices that we should be following within the industry. So I want to go to Dennis's real quick, just so we can make sure that we hear him out. But then, Brett, I would like to jump to your product, if that's okay. So
Yeah,
Dennis
great.
says absolutely not. Do not use elastomeric. I like that word. Elastomeric coating under solar panels. It can be used to seal around mounts, but not under. It can peel away and leak. My question, Brett, does this elastomeric type of coating void any manufacturer warranties?
From the shingle standpoint, or from like the solar mounting standpoint?
From the shingles standpoint.
You know what? That's actually a good question. I'm not as familiar with the types of coatings that you guys are referencing. I've recently seen options where you can put coatings down, but my understanding was that like those types of coatings were used to preserve and prevent like algae from growing over time. There's things like that you can add to shingles that you can spray on after the fact, and there are manufacturers that include that type of stuff that prevent things like algae and mold from growing on it. So that was more specifically what I was kind of referencing as a way to kind of add longevity to a roofing system.
Okay, cool. Now I have a question for you before we jump into your product, because this one I don't know. The manufacturer's warranty might be voided if we install solar panels on it, but we're not installing solar panels on every single roof plane most of the time. Do they discriminate against other roof planes that have not been had solar installed on them? Do they say, sorry, the warranty just won't work?
No, yeah, it's a great question. So, that's where the finger pointing starts to come in, right? So this is why it's important to have solid relationships with roofers that can come and inspect and actually be an advocate for you and your company if you do have an issue. Like I had said just earlier, like a lot of leaks are not a result of the mounts on the solar. They're just natural types of leaks that happen because of failed flashing or some other reason. There are extreme situations where you can have like really extreme buildup of ice over long periods of time in a valley on a roof that starts to get over the top of that valley flashing, and that can cause leaks. And what's important to know is that as a solar installer, you're going to get the call, right? They're going to call you first because they're assuming, oh, well, I did solar in the last, 3-5 years. I'm having a leak. I never had a leak before. It must be from my solar. Kind of depends upon your customer. But no, the warranties on other areas of the roof are still intact. And
Okay.
it does get into that situation where you really need to like do an investigation. You got to document what you see. And really, it's on the roof. Unfortunately, for the solar guys, it's like on the solar guys to like prove that it wasn't, because for the roofing installer or the manufacturer, that's the easiest out for them. I don't want to say it so negatively, but like, yeah, I mean, if they know that there's solar on it, the first thing they're going to say is like, okay, was it a solar related issue? Prove it wasn't.
Prove it wasn't. So guilty until proven innocent.
Honestly, that's how I think most of the installers in our industry feel, right? They own that roof until proven otherwise.
Even if it's on an adjacent roof plane, we install on the south and the north side is leaking, the manufacturer could still utilize that tactic. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Like I've been involved in a number of investigations where the leak is, it's in the dining room, and it was the south facing roof, and that's where the solar was installed. But if you go up and you do the investigation, it actually had traveled across like a collar tie and then down the other side, and it was actually on the other side of the roof. So that's why it's good for your site visit technicians and your salespeople, as much as can possibly, be educated in this stuff to learn how to search for the path of a water leak. Like, where is it really coming from and what to look for?
Thank you. Yeah, like I showed you, I have so many pictures and so many things to go over with you. But before I do that, I do want to talk about Brett's product. He's saying that there's a change in the composition shingle flashings over the last 5 years, and it's snowballing. It's becoming more and more and more prevalent. In fact, these are not Brett's words, and I'm just saying this off of the top, but it's almost being looked down on or frowned upon to use those metal flashings. Am I wording that properly, Brett?
Not exactly, I would say.
Okay. Brett said you're the worst if you use metal flashings. That was quote.
No, not at all. We sell metal flashings, and they've been an industry standard for a long time. Like, I literally remember as a solar sales rep on Long Island, our method of attaching on comp shingle, if it was not a re-roof, it was a retrofit, was we would wrap each lag bolt in butyl tape and then send that through with the L flip. right? So we're going back a ways, right? So there was a
Right.
time when like products like Quick Mount and EcoFasten, like they were not widely used. We're talking pretty early days of solar install on retrofit. I remember driving past the project one of my competitors were doing. I stopped. I saw all these metal flashings on the roof, and I called up my sales manager like that minute. I was like, dude, if you want me to sell the same value, like we got to start using some type of metal flashing like these guys are using. And that really, I want to say that was like 2009, 10 on the East Coast at least. And
Oh, wow, before me. Wow.
so
How long you been
that,
in solar?
2008, I want to say, was
Oh.
when I got my start.
Very cool. All right.
So yeah, like as we were talking about earlier, like there's been a really big shift in the choices that installers are using for attachments. And I don't want to just say it's just us, although I do think that we've pushed the envelope and evolved and invented some products that have been very successful for a number of reasons. But you go back 5 years and standard metal flashings, Galvalume, aluminum flashings, 8x10, 12x10, 12x12s. You almost see this like trend where they were humongous at one time. These flashings were humongous and they were extremely expensive. And then over time, they kind of just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And as we were talking about earlier on this podcast, as time has gone on, it can be very difficult for installers, especially newer installers and certain types of roofs to like properly install a metal flashing. So no disrespect and not looking down on using metal flashings at all, but the reality is that installers are going to use things that work because like we talked about earlier, there's not a whole lot of warranty being maintained when you're doing solar. It's really on the solar installer. You're taking over a lot of that warranty. The roofing installer is not going to hold that warranty once you install on their roof. At least, again, like the plane of the roof that you've decided to install on. The manufacturer of that shingle, if it's a retrofit, is also not going to be standing behind that warranty. You've literally driven holes through their product and they're installed. So solar installers are in the position where they need to decide what is the best, easiest to install, most reliable product for them. And I think what we've seen especially in the last 5 years, is a lot of installers are realizing that these metal flashings that were sort of a staple of solar asphalt shingle mounts, they can leak. And it's not because it's a faulty product. It's because the application is very difficult to do correctly. And as we had talked about earlier, there's a lot of reasons for this. So again, like in the past, a place like Texas might not have been a big market. So you're doing installs in the Northeast. It's not as hot in those environments. Markets like the Carolinas, Virginia, Florida, places where you might have shingles that are in hotter climates, those shingle systems are now, because of the heat, they're getting glued shut, right? So like you can't just go up there and like peel a shingle up. Like they're glued shut. So you're an installer and you're on that roof, and you've got to get these metal flashings between these courses of
crowbar
shingles.
you were mentioning?
Yeah, totally, man. Like that's and this is from the word of the installers, ops managers, QC guys. Like if on certain roofs, man, you're just going to tear the crap out of that system, trying to get this quote unquote code compliant product to work. And it's just a really interesting topic. So there were a couple of companies that have been doing this for a long time, not us, right? Going back as much as 30 years, they've been using mounts that are not relying on like third course of shingle high flashing design. Again, we do this. We sell these products still. But the preference of our customers has really shifted, gone from like 80-20, 80% metal flashing, 20% something else, to I would say we're like 70%, if not 75%, what we would consider a flexible flashing product. So
wow.
And it's not just us as a manufacturer. All the main racking brands have come out with products, have experimented, I would say, with some products to some varying levels of success. There have definitely been some products that were created and invented that did not work. Our choice in what we developed was we leveraged some products that had been in the market globally for a long time. So we have products that utilize what we have branded our EverSeal seal. It's a butyl sheet that fits the profile or the footprint of our mounts. And so one of the things that we first invented or or evolved was, okay, you know, you have splices, you have attachments, you have flashings, you got to get these flashings underneath. You got to find rafters, right? Which is a whole other topic we could talk about. That's extremely challenging for installers and creates a lot of issues. So some of our products allow for rafter install, no pilot holes. So you're not like searching for your rafter, right? You go down, you know, you do your best to hit your rafter. If you miss that rafter a little bit, you can then add more screws and go deck, right? So one of the big interesting things about rafter attach, like I just moved into this house in Connecticut and I had my system installed, Shingle roof, by a pretty reputable installer in this area that I've known for a while. And I went up and I inspected, because I'm a racking guy, and I went up and inspected, and there's probably like 5 shiners, as we call them. There's like 5 what we call like shiners or blowouts of the lag, because it's hard, man. It's not like there's really reliable stud finders for the crews out there to like really hit the dead center of your rafter, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of engineering and calculations that go behind how many attachments you need and like what the span is going to be depending upon your wind. And so these are things that are like what we do every day. So just getting back to these products is, you know, by relying on what we consider a flexible flashing. We're using a butyl-based rubber material that's already installed in the factory on the bottom of the mount. And it eliminates having to drill any pilot holes, so there's no exploratory drilling. And if you do miss your rafter, there's 6 holes or even more on this mount that allows you to attach to the deck, even if it's in just that location. And instead of like ripping apart your shingles or trying to find your rafter, you're just making a penetration at that spot. And what we found over, you know, the last 5 years we've been selling these type of products is our customers are coming back saying we're not ever seeing leaks now. We used to have some percentage of leaks, depending upon, like I said, you know, the style of shingle or how old it was or how hot the roofing system was. There was always some percentage that we might find that we had this. And now we're getting customers, a lot of them coming back saying we don't see it anymore.
That's
another
great.
aspect from the shingle perspective on this topic is that most of the shingle manufacturers, whether it's Owens, whether it's JF, the new shingles are adding a much heavier layer of adhesive between the shingles. You know, this is in part to try to maintain and increase their warranties on wind, right? So like when the wind blows, like they don't want their shingles flapping up. Because if they flap up in a high wind event, they'll crack and then their warranty claims. So they're adding even more adhesive between their shingles, which makes, you know, those legacy standard metal flashings even more difficult to properly install. And again, if we're going back to this original conversation of retrofitted metal flashing installs, are they maintaining any kind of warranty? They're not. They never did, right? And so if you're the solar installer, it's in your best interest to choose something that you just simply trust. It makes sense, is easy for your installers to do over and over and over again and eliminate that risk because it's on you as a solar installer anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of the theme of this whole conversation is once that installer for solar goes up there on that roof, it's their roof now. It's their baby. Even if there's a warranty associated with it, that could still last. Even if it's on the adjacent side of the roof that the leak is happening, that manufacturer is calling the solar installer first. So tough position to be in this solar world of contractors. Thank you for that explanation. The flexible flashings. You don't happen to have one in the house there, do you?
Great question. Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. Let me see. Hold on.
We can Google search one too. I just seeing if you're the type of man that brings work home with him because
it's in my garage. It's in the workshop. Let's put it that way.
That means that you love your product. All right. So I want to keep going with this, Brett. I just wanted you to talk a little bit. I'm going to go flying through this a little bit, but as you think up cool little quirks, those of you in the audience, Brett, David, yourself, please add things to this. This is meant to be educational, and we want to add little cool excerpts into the book. So if you have any little tidbits of information as I go through a typically mundane topic, that's the definitions of the different types of roofs you'll see here, then please add them. So earlier you mentioned a soffit, Brett. Soffit is labeled right under there. We've seen them. Sometimes they look like those cheese graters. They've got those perforated holes inside of there. Sometimes they're clean looking. But the soffit is there, and then you have fascia. And for those that missed the previous slide on a different, there's a drip edge. Brett, what is the drip edge actually for? I guess I have to ask that. What is that for?
Yeah,
What is it? What is the
yeah.
function of that?
So as with almost any roofing system, like the ultimate waterproofing layer is really like your underlayment, right? So whether it's like a metal or a concrete tile or even asphalt, like you have that top layer, which is going to be your tile or your asphalt, and they're designed to prevent specific damage from occurring underneath, right? That's their first job. Is like if there's hail, if there's heavy wind, if there's debris that's going to hit that roof, they're there to try to prevent any damage to that underlayment. So that underlayment is a paper. It's usually got a certain level of like hydrophobic coating in it, like a polymer soaked paper. Some roofing contractors, really go all in on ice and water shield, which is like more of like a really heavily dipped tarred or asphalt product with the granules on it, and they'll put that, and it comes in typically 3-foot sheets. And they'll put that on all your rakes and all your soffits and all your valleys all around the roof. And a lot of code requires that you have at least 3 feet. Some installers will do 6 feet of that. They'll do 2 layers. But that drip edge is there because water can get underneath. It can get past your shingles. And if that happens, you still have protection, right? So like that underlayment, that ice and water shield is there really as your final level of water protection. That drip edge, what it does is it's like a mechanical shaped flashing at the edge of the roof that helps to redirect that water away from the fascia, right? Because what you don't want is you don't want water just constantly dripping down the roof and then just trying to find its ways in between the pieces of your fascia and the framing around the soffit of the roof. So that drip edge helps to create like a lip so that the water will drip away instead of kind of just rolling down along the side. So it protects the water from getting into the walls of like your vinyl, aluminum, whatever siding you have on your house.
Interesting. That makes sense. Because I'm a sales rep, I'm not as knowledgeable as all of you. So I use analogies. So this reminds me of being at a restaurant when you go to pour a drink and then the water drips along the cup and goes down the bottom. So if that shingle is there, you're saying that water can come along the shingle and go back underneath. Probably
Correct.
like that does, right?
That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah.
All right. So if you guys ever need analogies, you know the place to come. Here we go. So we have the soffit and the fascia. We have the gutter. Those we pretty well know those. I didn't know what a fascia was when I was initially starting this, but that can be kind of that vinyl or that metal. At my house, it's actually just wood. People painted the wood. Is that pretty standard? Those are probably standard in different parts of the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times it is wood, and then depending upon the type of like siding that's used, they might put aluminum or vinyl siding, like a cap on the outside of that. So typically that is going to be wood no matter what, I believe. So even if there is like, your siding cap on the end of that fascia, there typically is some sort of wood framing that's there as well to create some rigidity.
Next, we have some terms that people might not be too familiar with, and I don't know the best way to describe it, but this is a rake. When you see that traditional house shape like this, that angle right there, not the top part, that's called the ridge, but that angle is typically called the rake. So these terms are probably pretty important to know as we talk about roofs, and I just want everyone on here to know what those are. Next, we have the ridge. That is when that comes to a point, when the house comes to a point, it's that top point. There are some other points that it comes to like this, and we'll go over those in a minute. But the very top spine of the house is called the ridge.
We also call that the ridge cap as well, depending upon, yeah.
I didn't know that, a ridge cap.
Yeah, so you kind of have two different versions there. So the one on the right is really more of a vented ridge cap. So it's a higher quality product with some flashing around it. It actually will sit up pretty high off the roof, and there's typically sometimes there's like a mesh plastic that creates like a rigid structure, or sometimes it's kind of like a mesh foam type of material. And really what that's doing, for the sales guys that don't know, first of all, don't step on it. That's the number one thing. If you get on a roof,
Don't step on the ridge.
Don't step on the ridge ever. That's a terrible idea. You could damage a roof if you step on the ridge. So roofing systems and attics are typically not closed, right? So they're open. And that's one of the ways that a home is maintaining like an R value or keeping the home cooler, is that soffit in your previous picture is designed to allow air to flow up and in, because as we know, like hot air rises. Your attics are generally going to be pretty hot. And trying to cool that attic space is a big component in trying to reduce how hot your house is and how much maybe air conditioning is being used. And so properly designed roofing systems that have properly designed soffits that allow enough ventilation, as well as properly designed ridge caps or ridges to allow that air to escape, is a really critical component of a properly constructed roof.
Awesome. I did not know. Thank you very much. I have plenty of homes that I need to go apologize for standing on their ridge. It's like the highest point of the roof. Like if you're going on the roof to look at the sunset, you go stand on the ridge.
Which, by the way, I will say, like, if you're a solar sales guy, like, learn this stuff. Like, I appreciate what you're doing here, because this is really valuable information, man. Like, if you're a solar sales guy and you're talking to homeowners, the more of these little tidbits that you can, bring up when you're talking to your homeowner, you come across as being knowledgeable, and they can trust you. And that's true. They should trust you. You should know these things.
I believe you should know them. That's why we're doing it. So many people don't know a lot of this stuff. So I'm very thankful for you, Brett, for coming on and doing this. And Matthew Mitchell and Dennis and Drew, thank you guys for hopping on. David, this is very important information. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Brett. Thank you, because I am passionate about it. I do believe sales reps should know this. Yeah. Next, we have the eave. That is the bottom part, and the eave can go along the entire perimeter of the home. Although this is the bottom part of the rake, that is still the rake, but the bottom of the flat level part is the eave.
Correct.
And if you have a single story home, or even if it's a double story, and you have a roof that comes down to an eave, typically, and I utilize this when I'm doing shading or I'm drawing trees in design software and proposal software, and I don't know how tall a tree is. Typically, that eave, the bottom of that eave is about 10 feet off the ground. It can vary a little bit, but rule of thumb is 10 feet. And what I like to do is on Google Maps, I mark it 10 feet from the eave to the ground, and then I count how high up that tree goes.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a cool point of reference there.
Have you, when you in your career, were you ever using like solometric sun eyes on a roof and running shading reports?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't touch the sun eyes because those were expensive and we weren't allowed to. But I started to learn and understand how the sun eyes worked, azimuth, and the shading that it would pull in and that type of stuff, where the sun would be relative to the type of year. And I ended up drawing shading heavier than it should have been because I didn't want re-signs. Because when that sun eye went up there, that was the end all be all. Like once that said something, that's just what it was. And I wanted my proposals to be better. I wanted them to be worse than what the sun eye said, so that I wouldn't have to re-sign the homeowner. And I took the hit on commission instead of made them pay an extra amount. It helps streamline things. I never had re-signs. I always had referrals. I like doing things kind of the clean way. I skipped over this. So, like I mentioned, that ridge comes to a point. There is another point that it can come to on the side of the homes, and that's called a hip. So there's a hip right there. A ridge points like this, and so does a hip, but a hip is not at the very top. So make sure that you guys understand what a hip is. Now, these do become really important as you're out there selling, because certain AHJs, certain towns, when you're getting your permits back, they will have fire codes. And the fire code actually specifically says how far apart you need to be from the ridge, or how far away you need to be from the hip or a valley. And that knowledge, that information right there, I would say about half of the time I sold homes or beat competitors, it was because of that. I got to draw more panels on a south facing roof because I knew that I could go all the way to the edge of a hip when most companies would put 3 feet to the hip. And we all know solar panels are approximately 3 by 5 feet. And so if I could add a whole nother 3 feet on there, and even in parts of San Diego, we can go all the way to the edge of the ridge as long as there's 3 feet on the adjacent side. But how could I understand this fire code or explain it or even design properly unless I knew these terms?
Yeah. Also, from a racking standpoint, because we get into the structural side of things, hip roofs actually a lot of times will have what's called box framing inside. And what
box
that
framing,
means
you said?
Yeah, it's like a box frame. So what they'll do is they'll frame out like the middle of the attic, like with walls, because they're actually putting your HVAC equipment up there. And in order to do that, a lot of times those rafters. So most people, we talked about rafters and trusses, right? And I don't know that we even really discussed what the difference between a rafter and a truss is. A truss system is typically built with like 2x4s, right? So 2x4s are one of your smaller types of wood construction. But if you design it in a system that's cross braced, then it can handle a much larger load. They're usually pre-manufactured. They get delivered to a construction site. And then your builder exactly is kind of just putting them into place. The picture on the left is a good example of like a truss system. The one on the right almost kind of looks more like rafters. It's hard to tell. It doesn't look quite like a truss. Typically, your trusses take up a lot of space in the attic, but it allows for a lower cost assembly using 2x4s instead of 2x6s, 2x8s, or even 2x10s. What you'll typically see is like a truss system with 2x4 framing that's 24-inch off center. So you have a wider spacing between your trusses, and you're using lighter gauge wood. Whereas in higher snow load places like in the Northeast, you'll have a 2x6 minimum, sometimes 2x8, and those will be anywhere from 16 to 24-inch off center. And that pitch of that roof will depend upon a lot of times the snow load. So the higher snow loads you get, the steeper that roof is getting, so that it's kind of sloughs off as much, so you don't build up like 6 feet of snow on your roof, right? That's pretty typical.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense. I just didn't think of it, but the trusses or the wood in there might be different gauges of thickness depending on whether it's a snow bearing roof or not. Right? I didn't think about that.
So actually, one thing that I was alluding to on the hip roofs, right, where you have like that hip space, is because of that box framing inside of the attic, you can sometimes have a rafter shift, a rafter change. So with those rafters going up and down the roof every 16 or 24 inches on that hip side, you see a lot of times where halfway up that section of the roof, you're going north and south. But to make room for those walls inside, you lose your rafters. And this happened on my house when I was installing with the support of some installers. And unfortunately, what can happen in that situation is like, you're hitting your rafters, kind of where they are. And then you get up to your next rail row and you're just like, like it's just Swiss cheese in your plywood.
Your rooftop.
And yeah, I went into it was hot, but I was up in my attic and it was like, just a line of holes, just searching for this. So unfortunately, I didn't do a good enough job in that scenario to like inspect my own roof, to like check in the attic that, my rafters were consistent. So like as a sales guy, when you're doing your sales call, you should, I believe, like a good salesperson really should spend the time, do your walk around the house, inspect the electrical equipment, make notes, detail, take pictures. These are all things that are going to help you on the back end of your sale anyway. And ask to get into the attic, and get familiar with what to look for in attic spaces. Obviously, be careful because you don't want to like stomp through their sheetrock. But documenting things like that ahead of time not only helps your install teams, but it also establishes a level of credibility that you care and that you know what you're talking about. And it gives you also those great opportunities to like, educate that homeowner a little bit about what you're doing.
Hey, want to get your brand in front of a dedicated solar audience? Sponsor an episode of the Morning Energy Show podcast. Showcase your brand with curated and produced video stories reaching an ever-growing solar community. This is your chance to highlight your brand to the industry leaders and solar enthusiasts alike. Head over to themorningenergyshow.com now to sponsor your episode. Brett, I'm super thankful to have someone like you on here advocating for the knowledge of sales reps
Yeah.
that they need to have this stuff, because I agree. It's why we're doing this. Sales reps should have this knowledge. You guys, you just avoid a whole bunch of re-signs, and you avoid losing commission. You get more referral based business. And I know it sounds silly to have a sales rep say, hey, like, go up in the attic. Don't be afraid of that. Here's why. Typically, when you're out there selling, you go back to the same neighborhoods, right? You're constantly going back to the same type of neighborhood, same area. And if you're good, I have friends, even the area I had when I was working, I was in it for 10 years. I have friends that have been in it for longer. It just becomes your neighborhood. And once you go in a specific attic and once you start to learn and understand those homes, a lot of times in these neighborhoods, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times, there's only four, 7, 8 variations of the different homes. And once you've been in one or two of them, then you know how the rest are, how they were built, because they're typically done by the same builders. If you're in one of those types of neighborhoods. So just look for patterns, look for things. You don't have to go up in every single roof. You might actually know based on your experience what is up there and not, depending on if you've been in the same area or working with those same builders. But I do think that everyone should learn this stuff, of course. That's why
You had touched on the topic of tongue and groove earlier, and tongue and groove, like 8x4 sheets of plywood, like I said, tend to be less common in roofing. But what you do tend to see, especially in older style homes, is like tongue and groove board. So it's not a huge sheet, but it's planks of tongue and groove. So like if you're a salesperson, you're in that attic and you're just seeing like what looked like literally just like like 2x6s, flat 2x6s on that roof. That's probably a tongue and groove style board roofing system, typically older, but something important for your install team to know going into that situation as well. Because one of the challenges with that is that's a much thicker style of wood, and trying to find the rafters could be kind of challenging as well when you're doing the install.
Mm-hmm. And just for everyone out there, for everyone out there saying, but that's what the site surveyor is for. You are correct. I'm not arguing that. I'm not combating that. You shouldn't have to learn all this stuff. Your site surveyor can go. But if you do learn this stuff, that's when you'll have less re-signs, referral-based business, all keeping your commission, not changing the contract, all those things. So it changes you as a salesperson. It changes who you are. You no longer just have to use your words. You can start to use pure logic. You can start to beat competitors by over-promising things, making mistakes in their proposals. And I'm going to stop preaching. I'm going to keep going with this. Here we go, because this is why we're here. So you mentioned earlier, Brett, a little bit about these flashings and valleys. So here's an example of a valley. It's the opposite of a hip. Hip comes to a point like this. It's not the ridge. And a valley just simply depresses like this. As you can see, these roof planes are coming to a valley. And as you can see in that valley, there is metal flashing. Brett, do you have any tidbits of info on this?
Yeah, I mean, the one on the left is actually a really premium type of valley flashing and architectural shingle. You can kind of see based upon like the definition, the height of those shingles. That's a pretty high quality product. For the typical salesperson, I don't think there's too much to know. But if you are going to be the type of guy or girl that is getting on a roof, be careful. Roofing, getting on roofs is pretty dangerous. So be careful, right? Like getting in an attic is a much easier thing to do as much as it's possible. If it's like a 1-story ranch or something like that, and you can get up like just a standard kind of A-frame ladder, that's okay. But be careful, first of all, because I've known a lot of people that have fallen off roofs. And you don't want to be that person, right? It's not worth it. But I would say that valley flashings or valleys in general are pretty common places where leaks do happen. Because it's a difficult area to flash. And water, like I was stating before, what can happen, especially in areas of a lot of ice and snow, is that ice will build up in those areas. It'll melt and then kind of settle in those areas. And then it freezes and turns to ice. And then you really have like this whole ice sheet, like a glacier, just sitting there, just dripping water on this pretty, this like susceptible area of your roofing system for leaks in general. And so if you are on a roof, if you're with your site visit team, or it's just an area that I would say try to get pictures of, right? So get the pictures back to your roofing, to your team, And then, even, when you're talking to the homeowner, ask them about, that's a whole other aspect of this conversation we kind of didn't talk about, which is it's a good idea when you're having these conversations with the homeowner to ask them, like, have you had any kind of leak issues in the past? Go on,
Oh yeah.
Because it kind of, you're demonstrating that you care. You're demonstrating that you want to find out if there's any existing issues. And that also can help later on in the conversation if there are problems, right? And then, okay, where have you had these issues before? Oh yeah, we have, the valley up here by the vestibule has leaked over a couple of times, and we've had some people out to fix it, right? So these are really good, pain points, but also really good investigative type questions to ask to find out what's going on with that roof. The homeowner's going to know, like you said earlier, they'll probably know that there's that it was a double layer of shingle, right?
Yeah.
So you don't always have to get up on the roof. You could just ask the homeowner, have you had issues before?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Little side note on that for those listening, the contractors, although you may be 1099, because that's a very popular type of, I don't want to call it employment. It's very popular type of way of doing
Ownership.
business.
Yeah.
If you are a salesperson is being 1099, states like Nevada are kind of having people become W-2, and some installers believe that their sales reps should be W-2. Whether you W-2 or 1099, this is the part that blew my mind. If you're 1099, you get on that roof and you fall off, the installer may still be liable for you getting on that roof. It's kind of a scary situation for installers, and they don't like when their salespeople get on roofs, even if you are a 1099. So if you do hear them telling you not to get on the roof, that would be the reason why. And it's not bad to listen to, because I'm not on roofs every day. I'm clumsy sometimes. I make mistakes. I could see myself falling off a roof, making on one of those TikTok videos. All right, so here we go. So next up we have anyone that doesn't have this, that is learning this type of stuff. I would actually recommend getting something like this that lists what everything is until you can go through and around the house and kind of see. And if you're wondering if there might be any water damage, I should have talked about this earlier, on the roof, you can actually just walk around the perimeter of the house and look up. If you see any of the soffits are missing, and you can see that plywood underneath and it looks like there's water damage, or if the fascia looks like it's completely waterlogged and stuff's jacked up there, there's some good signs that you might need a roof just from walking around the perimeter of the house. And before I go into the appointment, or sometimes before I knock the door, I'll just kind of look on this side, and the door's here in the middle. I'll actually walk to the other side of the house and look, and then I will walk back, because it's all about choosing the homes that you want. I do cherry pick my homes. I want homes that are going to be the easiest to go in with the least path of resistance. Huge homes with air conditioning units and swimming pools without water damage are typically I love that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, anything to add to that, Brett?
Oh, no, I was saying it's a great idea, right? I mean, if you're knocking on doors, or you're canvassing, get familiar with what the really good looking opportunities look like, right? Plenty of sun, not a tremendous amount of vegetation or tree growth around it. Roofing system that looks like it's in pretty good condition. Architectural shingle as opposed to 3-tab. We don't really see too much 3-tab anymore. I don't know if the difference, or if we've talked about the difference in
4-tab, 3-tab. Yeah. No, please do.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking to some manufacturers, 3-tab is not nearly as common as it used to be. 3-tab, you can really see it when you get on a roof. It just looks flat. It just looks like you see the shingles, but there's no definition between the shingle courses or your keyways. So it's a cheaper, lower quality product that is used a lot because it's inexpensive. But my understanding also is that a lot of manufacturers have kind of gotten away from it because it just creates a lot more liability long run. So seeing 3-tab roof is also something to look out for, because A, it's a cheaper product. B, it also means that the roof is probably a little older because it's not as common. And not that this is the case, but it could be the case that the installer of that product, it might be a lower cost installer. So maybe there might be some other risks on that roof as opposed to coming across a nice architectural shingle that has good color definition and good 3D dimension between the shingles. So
While you were chatting, I went to find a potential sample.
yeah.
Does it look about right?
Yeah, totally. So the one on the left is a pretty standard, actually looking like a decent 3-tab. The more definition you can kind of see, the better. It really comes down to the thickness of the shingle. So the thicker that shingle is, the more rigid it's going to be, the more water wicking it's going to have. It's going to prevent water. It's going to prevent high winds and damage. So 3-tab is just a very one-dimensional kind of looking product as opposed to your architecture. So look out for 3-tab. Doesn't mean you can't do solar. You can still do solar on it, but just not as commonly as used these days.
Thank you. I didn't know the difference between those. Okay, so next slide that I have here are those archaic, old, nasty metal ones. Let me see if I can find one of those. What's it called? The one that you had? It's a flexible flashing.
Oh, well, so flexible flashing is a term that we use to describe what the flashing is, but I would pull up like our splice foot XL or our multi-mount you can find. So like K2 splice foot XL is a good one. I feel like such a dummy for not grabbing one and having it nearby right now.
No. Now this looks like it might be specific to K2, or just the way that it's worded is specific to K2.
K2 splice foot XL. That's our product.
K2 splice foot XL. Oh, there's the footprint you were talking about. Let me take this here.
And again, like just kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't believe that there's really anything wrong with traditional metal flashings. But if you try to understand like where metal flashings come from, it's through code compliance for new construction on roofs, right? So like the best thing you can do, whether it's a vent or it's a penetration or it's a plumbing vent or something, is flash it. Flash it to the third course that gets away from your keyways. And that's something you can do on a new construction, right? You're not messing with the existing roofing envelope. The metal flashings the solar metal flashings kind of came from that, is where they started. Literally, the companies that made those originally were like, hey, why don't we have this? This is what the roofing industry uses, right? But the way you install those products is you got to get through, the natural seal that your shingles have first with a pry bar. And I was just talking to a buddy yesterday who does this every day. And he's like, dude, I've done it where I've just shoved that pry bar and I've just ripped right through the underlay.
Oh, that's not good.
So it's really like a good example of like a product that was developed as a response to the interpretation of a code that exists for new construction. But I do believe has made it really difficult for installers over the last many years to do properly as a retrofitting application. So if we're talking about flexible flashings in our splice foot product, you eliminate all of that. Like you're not searching for, you can install it. So for example, on like that picture on the left, this is our kit and it's got a nice wide base and it comes in a kit with 2 screws. So it's a top and a bottom screw. And it's a number 14. So it's got great embedment and it's self-tapping, right? So traditional lag bolts, you got to find your rafter, hope that you're dead center, make your pilot hole. And then you're sending typically like a 3 or 4 inch 5/16 size lag bolt into that hole. And that's a pretty large fastener for what is a 2x4. And we all know if it's a 2x4 truss, it's not actually 2 inches wide. It's like an inch and a half. So the amount of room for error for a typical installer is like pretty rough. So you even in the best installers, you'll have some blowouts and you'll not have full embedment. So again, this is a good picture because what it's showing here is you can put 2 screws in the middle on a rafter. So your rafter attached, good structural connection, no pilot hole. And if you do miss, we have engineering letters that show you exactly how many screws give you the amount of structural capacity into the decking. If it's 7/16 OSB or even if it's plywood. Honestly, when you get into plywood, the pullout values are much better because plywood is a much denser type of sheathing board than an OSB. So
And the inspectors know this, and the inspectors know these same things.
So you're bringing up the topic. Yeah, this is the topic. So I would like I said, like 80% of our customers that are on comp buy that product, and then the new products that we're launching that are even better. We occasionally come across a jurisdiction where the AHJ is referencing that International Residential Building Code that we talked about. I wrote it down. It's 903.2, and it states in that code that it must be a metal flashing. Again, that code is really referencing, I believe, I'm not 100%, but it's really referencing the new construction aspect of this. You know, it's not common. Like we don't get a lot of plan checkers and permitting offices rejecting this stuff. They just don't. Because again, like this whole topic is this gray area between roofing standards and solar standards.
Right.
And we've already addressed the fact that most solar installers know that when they put holes in that roof, whether it's a metal flashing or it's a standoff or it's flexible flashing, they own it. That roofing company's not going to hold up that warranty. You got to be there to address it. So it is good practice to have great roofing relationships. It's good practice to add a division of roofing to your company if you can, long term.
Wow.
But these flexible flashing products, I'm proud to say that when we developed this product probably 5 years ago, we were kind of debating what to do next because we saw some products coming, right? We saw the shrinking of the flashing to something just simpler. And one of the ideas was, well, we have some mounts that have like cavities in them. Maybe we could just like inject a sealant, a standard, Chemlink or GeoCell sealant into it. And we kind of debated that. And I think I was on the wrong side of that argument at the end, but we decided against that aspect. And I'll be honest, and not to trash competition or anything, but we have heard of like some of those products where you have to apply the sealant to the bottom of the mounts being problematic because it leaves the responsibility of the product working properly is that installer literally applied the correct amount of sealant to every single mount. And man, if you're an installer and it's, like you said, 118 degrees in Arizona at 4:00 in the afternoon, and you've put in like 80 mounts, you're pretty delirious sometimes, honestly. Like, knowing for sure. So like our perspective is let's take that responsibility away from the contractor in the field. Let's apply it perfectly in the factory every time. And then when you peel that back, that butyl lasts 30 years minimum. And it's been proven through a lot of testing and field application. Those screws pull that butyl down into the hole. And we believe in it because of our testing and because of just industry proof. But in the last 5 years, we've been selling products like this. That's the feedback we're getting from customers. This is so much easier to train our guys. They don't leak. And so it's exciting. Like I know a lot of people talk about racking and they talk about it as like being, not the sexy part of the industry, but it's what I've been doing for 11, 12 years. And it's pretty exciting time to be in racking right now.
That's cool that you're passionate about it like that. I love that actually.
It's kind of interesting right now. Like the racking manufacturers, whether you guys know this or not, today have far more to do with an approval on a permit and the type of equipment that can be used than ever before. So like if we're talking about MLPEs and rapid shutdown requirements, UL 3741, these are all things that are now in my department as opposed to an inverter or a module or anything else. So it's my responsibility, our responsibility as a racking company to certify a system as having rapid shutdown compliance, which is pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. I like that. I like being an important part of what's going on to the customer. This kind of applies to the solar sales guys, like why someone might be using, a Tesla inverter with MCIs versus Enphase or SolarEdge. And we're getting a little off topic, but there's a lot of really cool things that are going on in racking in general. One thing that you had brought up earlier that I wanted to touch on that's pretty cool is you were talking about the difference in the cost of the racking for like landscape versus portrait, right?
Oh, on ground mounts, yeah. Or even on traditional roofs.
Yeah, just traditional roofs. And it's a really great topic to talk about because you're totally right that typically if you're doing landscape oriented modules on a roof, they're not running rails up and down the roof because you can't line things up the way you want necessarily with the rafters. So you're always running these rails left to right. It's adding like 40% more mounts to the roof. So it's more time, it's more cost, it's more risk, it's more material. It's just expensive. But the reality is a lot of times like a landscape oriented module will fit really well with that roofing system. You look at a typical gable roof, it's kind of a rectangle, right? So like landscape can a lot of times be your highest power density orientation on that roof. And something that we're doing, so the evolution of that product that we were just looking at, that splice flow, is a new railless system that we've developed called the Mini Rail Comp. And it's a product that is railless and it's completely direct to deck attached. And we're definitely pushing the envelope a little bit, but we're doing it responsibly, right? Everything is tested and engineered. We have engineering partners that are validating like the pullout values. But what this allows installers to do, like if you had to think about racking as like what's the perfect racking for modules, it would really just be like, can I just put my module like wherever I want? Like can I just put one there, can I put one here, like, and not have to worry so much about like where the mounts are and where the racks are. Like you literally just like Velcro a panel or your panels to the roof. That's kind of like the holy grail in a way, right?
Yeah.
These new rail systems that we're developing, they are completely direct to deck. But it utilizes
They're
that
completely,
same
what was that term? They're completely what?
I said direct to deck. So we're not hitting the rafters at all. And based upon our testing and actually based upon NDS and the APA, American Plywood Association, there's very well documented pullout values on fasteners. What this means for sales guys, what this means for the solar installer is no matter what orientation of your panel, it doesn't change two things. It doesn't change the cost of your racking at all. It's the same. The racking is the same in portrait and landscape, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And also in landscape on a rail-based racking system, technically you might be mounting some of those modules in an area that's not conducive with their warranties, right? So like short side module clamping in landscape. So it's like another reason to kind of stay away from landscape. With our system, we can maintain our quarter point mounting locations, which as modules have gotten much bigger, which everyone knows they have tremendously, these mounting locations and maintaining those spots has become even more important. So getting a little off track of like, what a typical solar sales guy needs to know. But I think most people know about like railless has been around and why is it around? Like who's using it? Tesla's always had their, Tesla ZEP system and things like that. But we're developing our team. I'm really proud of our team. We're developing some really innovative, cool products that make things easier, make it more reliable, reduce a lot of cost, and more importantly, on the distribution side, eliminate a whole lot of extra material that you need from one job to the next. So that's my elevator pitch.
No, I love it. If I can translate for sales reps, Brett here is basically promising that if your company uses K2, you will have a lower red line. Is that right, Brett?
that's between you and your EPC. I can't say
Throw a little spice in there. All right, so I'm gonna get back to these, and it's interesting because I consider myself to be pretty in tune with the industry and how things are going, but I was unaware of these mounting brackets that you have. And now that I am aware, it's definitely going to be something that I'm teaching. I've always been using these old dated metal training flashings. So thank you very much, Brett, for that. Appreciate it. We did go into trusses a little bit. Here's one I want to chat about. This right here is an older version of what Brett explained to us right here, I believe. This is the ridge, and he said that there's a vent underneath here that allows hot air to escape. But what we have seen traditionally are these, otherwise known as whirlybirds. It has been known to me, and we can see some cupping on those shingles there.
that ridge cap is a little rough looking.
Yeah. But what I've learned from these whirlybirds is that they stop solar panels from going on. And I made a big Facebook post that said, that you are able to take these whirlybirds off and put a solar panel over them if you replace it with a just forgot the name, the flat vents. Those called?
We
I want to say it
just
starts
call them
with
event
V.
flashing. Like event flashing is typically how.
Yeah, there's a particular brand that
you're right.
everyone
There's a
uses.
particular term. Although I would say that like this type of flashing is typically a motorized. Flashing. This type of vent is typically motorized, right? So like they're designed as a way that you're like actively clearing the hot air out of the attic. So you just need to make sure that you have proper ventilation as well. So a lot of times you could replace something like that with, on your gables, right? On a gable roof, you'll have your sidewalls, and a lot of times there'll be a window that's just a vent. So you could definitely like replace that and put it on like the sidewalls of the exterior as well.
Dennis is calling it a low profile vent, and I forgot the term. There is a brand that most everyone uses. I forgot what that is. But I thought it was as simple as just taking this off and putting one of those low profile vents on so I could put a solar panel over it, since we don't need this thing to pass inspection, or the house doesn't need it. But when I did that, some very hardcore and trusted roofers came on and said that's an idiot. That's an idiot way of thinking. Solar salespeople are running the industry. Solar installers are running it. Don't do it. And so for anyone out there, I went through and tested against that theory, and it is correct. Most roofers believe that we should not be simply just replacing these whirlybirds with low profile vents without taking a considerable amount of steps in order to ensure that roof is waterproofed. Brett, any statements on that?
I do. So, I would tend to agree with your roofing contractors. Like the ventilation in a house should have been, fairly well calculated. How do you ensure that there's enough ventilation and enough exhaust space to get that hot air out? As professionals in the renewable energy space, we're going to their house, trying to say, hey, I'm going to save you money. This is all about a return on investment and doing the right thing for the environment. And a lot of that is heating and cooling costs, right? That's a huge part of what their bill is. So you don't want to do something that's going to prevent their house or cause them to use more air conditioning in the summertime. But I do have a little tidbit to share
Yes,
that I've done. So there's a product called, and this is a little bit of a different product. It's not the same as what you're showing, but it's called the Quiet Cool. I installed one of these myself in my house in Arizona. I grew up with one of these. It's called an attic fan, right? So it's what you just showed is an attic vent, but they also have products that are attic fans. And the reason I would suggest this to the solar sales guys is in the shoulders of the hot seasons, right? Your late spring, your like early fall. If you can offer a product that can probably be packaged into your financing product as well, anyway, and easily installed. It's a attic fan that basically sucks all the air in the house into the attic and out those vents. And you can control it through a smart plug even. They're super simple to install. And what you'll find is like a lot of times, especially like I lived in Arizona and it's super sunny. So like it might be March. It's not even hot out. It's like 70 degrees outside, 60 degrees, and it's nice and cool. But my house is freaking hot because I just don't have enough ventilation. I installed one of these Quiet Cool attic house fans, and like $1,500, $3,500, and I just popped that thing on, and dude, like the air it's like a breeze in every window of the house, really nice cool breeze. So it's a really good little thing that a solar salesperson could suggest or add to their sale that helps the consumer to reduce the amount of air conditioning that they're using, help to reduce their overall electric consumption. It's kind of slightly different topic. It just kind of reminded me of that.
No, I'm glad you. What's that?
I was going to say Dennis is spot on. So solar vent with their low profile, they have a solar panel on them. You'd want to put that on like the other side of the house, right? Because if you're going to put a solar panel over it, you got to replace where you're going to put that thing. But those solar vents work great.
Yeah, those attic fans used to be my little piece de resistance, my little secret weapon.
Oh, nice.
That I pull out. But I quit selling those as much. I can't remember why. I think not every house is capable of getting them, and I think I put my foot in my mouth once, and I didn't learn which ones are able to and which ones are not. But I will tell you, the homeowners that did have those installed, said that their house was cooled within minutes, and it saved them a whole bunch of on energy, and
Yeah.
it made this solar system that I had put in more efficient for them because they were able to use more power on other things than cooling their house down.
Yeah, totally.
Great stuff. I just have a few more questions for you. I know we've been going for 2 hours, and for those of you that have stayed on here, good for you. This is a long one. I just have a couple more questions I wanted to run by you, Brett. And I do know some of these. What is a square? That's a very that's a term that we should probably know when talking about roofing.
Yeah. A square is, in the roofing industry, a 10 by 10, 100 square feet of roofing space. And it's how they calculate and bid, a lot of their jobs. They can typically do it, like you go to GAF. I know I reference them a lot. I just know that product pretty well. They have calculators and stuff. You can go on their website and through Google Earth, you can get a pretty quick estimate. Most roofing contractors will do their estimates based on how many squares, how many hundreds of square feet of roofing they got to do. That's one asphalt. So that's a roofing square, 10 by 10.
10 by 10. Yep. When we get proposals, it'll say a number of squares. And I wanted to take the liberty here of showing you guys something. Let's see. Here we go. So one of the things when I do when I'm in a house, instead of bothering all of the homeowners that I'm talking with, bothering all of the roofers, I do something like this, and I'm just going to show you a very simple example. But if you go to a roof and you right click it, measure the distance, you can actually start to take the squares of that roof on Google Maps itself and come up with an approximate amount of area here. 1,010 square feet. Now, if you look at my screen here, we just measured 1,010 square feet, but that's assuming that the roof is flat. Since we know that roof is not, we saw that it had a ridge, which means it's angled. And if I were to take that ridge and angle it, you see that it is no longer touching my hand. Anytime you angle a roof, you're going to have more square feet that you have to do. So let me show you this right down here at the bottom where it says 1,000 square feet. I multiply that by 1.2, essentially adding 20%, turning it to 1,200 square feet to compensate for that angle. And if you divide that by the 100 square feet that Brett mentioned, this house is approximately 12 squares. If you know the price of a square, then you can approximately tell a homeowner the price of the roof without bothering all of your roofers for a quote. You guys, I have been so accurate on this. I tell the homeowners I'm accurate within $1,000. If it needs any more cushion outside of that, I use my commission. It's not much, but this works for all types of different homes, and it's a rough estimate on how much it needs. There's other variables to consider in expense, like if there is water damage to those to that plywood underneath, then you'd have to replace some of those boards. Some of these companies in their proposals, they add fees to cover some of that, since they already know that there's going to be damage, whether they're tearing up the nails or whatever it is. They add a 20% replacement on those things. When you look at a roofing proposal, do not be caught up by the price alone. Every single roofer has different little things. Like Brett mentioned earlier, that some might want to add more adhesive than other roofers do. There's different little quirks in these proposals that make them unique, because these installers have got to believe that they started this business on purpose, that they started this business because they believe that they can do it better than the companies that they worked with. And their beliefs differ depending on these companies that you go with. So a proposal is simply not just a proposal. A proposal tells you what makes this company unique and what they're willing to put in there. For example, does this company add the 20% wood replacement or not? Is it going to be added on later? What do their contracts say? What are the terms in it? So pricing these things out, if you use a company and you get comfortable with them and you like all of these terms that they put on their proposals, then you know what a price per square approximately is for a tear off and a new roof. Now all you have to do is go on Google Maps and do that little trick that I showed you, and that'll get you accurate within about $1,000. You multiply those squares by the price of the squares that you've been quoted on every single other proposal. Next question I wanted to bring up to you here, and we're getting down to the very last of it all, is what is the paper that you referred to, the felt paper, the black paper that goes underneath the shingle. What is felt? What is that?
Yeah, so every roofing system, whether it's metal or tile or asphalt, is going to have your sheathing underlayment. We call that like an underlayment. It's a paper. It's usually got it's a hydrophobic layer that really is waterproof, and so that's your first first barrier of protection against water intrusion is that paper. Typically, that's going to be rolled in 3-foot sections. That's rolled across the entire roofing plane. What you'll do is on that drip edge will go over the edge of your sheathing, like the plywood or the OSB, and kind of lock that paper into place. And so that's a part of the whole waterproofing system. So even if you have shingle issues going on, that paper should protect you. Quality paper, should protect you as a backup. So with that said, there's a life to that stuff. So that paper is there, that underlayment is there to protect the water from getting in. If, let's say, something's going on with those shingles. So as the age of a roofing shingle goes, you see the peeling, you see the cupping, you see the granules coming out. Then you're going to start seeing potentially more water intrusion to that secondary layer, that real waterproof layer. And on tile roofs, that is the waterproofing. If guys are familiar with tile roofing, right? So like the tiles that are there really are just to kind of protect that underlayment layer, that paper. And like the tile paper is much thicker. It is obviously relied on much more because it is a bit more open of a structure. So yeah, we call that underlayment. We call that your waterproofing paper. And there's different levels of quality of that. And then around your rake, in all edges of the roof in your valleys, you'll have what we call like that ice and water shield, which is a much thicker layer. It's like a peel and stick that goes down. It's got another hydrophobic coating layer around where you're going to put your flashings as well. So that's what the paper is. It's just like an integral part of the roofing system under where the shingles are going.
I was going to ask you that. If you just described it perfectly. Thank you for that. The very last topic I want to talk about on here, and I'm going to ask David and Brett what their last topics are as well that they want to cover. But if any of you are listening in here and have any other questions we haven't covered yet, please feel free to do it. One question I get as a trainer is, why is it so expensive to tear the roof off? Why wouldn't we just add a second layer if it's allowed? Well, you create more water. You create more risk for water damage, I would say, if you put a second layer on. Water can get stuck in underneath those shingles. Sorry, I'm not speaking so eloquent here. Water can get stuck underneath those shingles, and they're more susceptible to that damage. And so people try to prevent a tear off, but why? Tear offs become expensive, and here's the reason why. The roofer will I'm losing my mind here. The roofer will go and get a dumpster. Usually you've seen those, or a big dump truck. And they'll have these tools. They look like rakes with prongs in them, so the nails get caught in it. Then they lift it up and starts to tear these off, and they slide them off the roof. Typically, if you're doing that, you want to have some of the nicer companies have a big net that captures all of the nails and everything. They still go afterwards with a big magnet and try to comb the yard for any nails that they can pick up. But those big nets have been a big help to the industry, to the roofing industry. But when they push those things off and it goes inside of the dumpster, when you go to dump that material, the dump lets you go in. They weigh your vehicle before you go in, and then they weigh it after. And so everyone can just drive right into the dump. And so if you have to imagine, if you have this big dumpster full of composition shingle from a roof, you have to imagine how heavy that is. They weigh that thing going in, and then it dumps it all and comes back out. That weight, the difference in weight, is what they're going to get billed for. And that is why these contractors have to bill for a tear off if they're going to be doing a roof. Some people, I've heard sales reps say, well, they're doing the roof, they should just do the tear off or they won't get the job. That's not the case. There's an added expense. You have the labor of the employees doing it, tearing it all off, and then you have the cost of taking that thing to the dump. That was the last piece that I had. Brett, before I get to you, David, do you have any final questions that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I had a couple I wrote down here. One we kind kind of touched on this, and I believe you might have said the answer, but I wasn't quite sure. You mentioned there was a difference between truss and rafter. I thought that was an interchangeable term. What is the exact difference there?
Yeah, so great question. Especially for tract homes, where it's a developer building a couple hundred to a couple thousand homes at a time. They're a lot of times they're going to want to try to pre-manufacture products as much as they can, right? Like, if it's not being built in a factory, how much of that roofing system or that building can be built in a warehouse ahead of time? So trusses are pre-engineered roof framing. So Jake had brought up a picture earlier. So like we said, like those rafters on a gable roof are going to be in a triangular shape. And to withstand the pressures of wind and snow and the weight of the roof and things like that, a lot of rafters, they're not going to be really supported depending upon the run between your ridge and the eave, right? So I've been on roofs like a hip roof where it's a little flatter and you might have really long runs of 2x6 rafters. And I've even been on some, this is like another thing that can come up for structural inspections is, if that rafter run is, 15, 18 feet, and then you're going to put like solar weight on top of that, you might have a jurisdiction inspector come back and say, hey, like you need to build a knee wall in there. You need to put collar ties across there to like support that really long run. So the difference between a truss and a rafter is a truss is typically 2x4s, which are thinner, smaller pieces of wood, obviously, typically pine, Doug fir. But it's built and braced in such a way so that it's stronger, right? So you're using lower cost pieces of wood, but it's all built together. Yeah, it's a perfect example of types of roof trusses. So it's basically like engineering these bracings so that it's allowing you to use 2x4s instead of 2x6 and allowing you to do it every 24 inches instead of every 16 inches. The other advantage is it's pre-built. A lot of times you're not typically building truss systems in the field on the roof. They're going to be pre-built in a place. Most people that have seen trucks go by and they see like these big wood pallets on the back of a flatbed, they've seen trusses. They just didn't know that they were looking at that. So from a cost standpoint, it can be lower material cost. It's much faster to install these because they're like pre-built. They have all the plates on them already. Rafters are going to be, bringing up a 2x6, a 2x8 onto the roof that's, 12 to 20 feet long. So it's a lot more labor. In that case, rafters can be stronger if they're heavier gauge wood, but trusses are my understanding is that trusses are a lot faster and easier to install and lower cost.
Thank you for that answer. Appreciate that.
We're writing the book on solar, literally, and you can be part of it. Sponsor a segment in the solar manual that you are passionate about and be cited as an industry expert. Plus, pre-order the book now to get it at the lowest possible price. This is your opportunity to contribute to the ultimate industry reference. Visit thesolarmanual.com to learn more.
Second question I had wrote down here. Earlier, we were talking about things you can identify when looking at a roof. You're walking up to a roof to kind of see that, hey, it's old, it's damaged. You had the cupping, you had kind of the cracks, things like that. What about fading in general? Like, how much weight can you put on looking at a roof and it looks old versus it actually being old? Can roofs just fade and they look old, but they're not actually old?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and I think that's where like a lot of the gray area comes in. It's hard, There's roofs that I look at and I'm like, I honestly can't tell. I can't tell if that's 10 years old or 15 or 20 years old. So it's a tricky thing to look out for. But I think a lot of the things we talked about in this conversation are the things you would look for, right? I was looking at a roof with a customer a couple of weeks ago, and from the ground, it looked fine. The roofing looked pretty good, but we actually got up on the roof and, pretty much every course of shingle had lost probably like 40% of the granules that were in it. It's ready to go, has to be replaced. You don't want to install solar on that roof because then you're going to have to spend all that money pulling off your equipment at some point in the future. So I think the things that we touched on, the cracking, the cupping, the peeling, especially if it's like, a single story ranch that you can get fairly close to looking. Just take the pictures, as a solar sales guy, take your pictures and share it with your team so they can share it with roofing, and they should be able to give you a good idea if you can't tell, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
David, I will tell you, you'll know when you see a house and you see delaminating and you see like the edges worn in and it's shiny along the edges of each of those individual things. It's like shiny. Or if you see the cupping, like you'll recognize it. It won't be the color fading thing I have not heard of, but you will recognize some of these other things that we mentioned.
Yeah, a lot of those other things that they're glaringly obvious, but I've gone, to homes before and like, oh, that roof looks old. Like just it looks faded. And then like, oh no, it's like 3 or 4 years old. It's like, okay, novice size. I thought that was an old roof. Like, guess not.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking that.
I think the tough part for sales for companies in general is like, if it's at that 12-year mark, right? And it's like the roof, you don't have a roofer that's willing to stand behind the warranty, or the company, there's some risk there. That sometimes that can be tough because it's like right there. So it makes it tough for the homeowner to say, yeah, I'm going to replace this roof that I just put on 12 years ago, and it's not even in that bad condition, but I want to avoid that future, redeploy cost, I would say.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. I guess the last thing is, I don't know if this is we were kind of talking about racking as well, so I figured I might as well at least bring this up. Are you familiar with a product called Solar Stack, and what do you think of that on asphalt shingles? I know they used to install it. Like, I'm in South Florida, and our wind codes here are very strict, and that on I just can't understand the concept of putting that on an asphalt shingle roof and wind's just not tearing that off because there's no penetration. But it's a product, and it's out there for sure.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I heard you correctly. You said Solar Stack, right?
Correct. Yep.
So
familiar?
I am. Yeah, I've seen it. Never really saw it in the field being used. Again, it's I believe that there is some approvals for that style of product. I mean, we're talking about an adhered product. So when I think of a product like that, what you're really doing is you're like adhering to the roofing membrane, right? So I think originally a product like that was being used for flat roof, like EPDM and torch down rolled asphalt systems. So at the end of the day, what you're doing is there's not a structural connection, like on any level, not a rafter, not the sheathing. So what you're doing is you're like gluing a mount to a system that was maybe designed to resist winds on their own, but look, I'm no expert, but like on an asphalt comp shingle roof, like I think that's a seriously risky thing to be doing. Because that's not, there's, like we talked about, even with the new shingle products having better adhesive, they were never designed to like hold what is like an aluminum and glass kite down in a high wind event, right? So I would be I would not do that myself. I probably wouldn't do that on a flat roof system. I think, whether you're a mechanical, a structural engineer, you're a roofer, you want your solar panels attached to the building as much as possible. We did talk a little bit about direct to deck versus rafter attached. When we're talking about metal roof attachment, it kind of gets into the same topic. Like a standing seam metal roof, right? You're using a clamp that squeezes down on that seam. The uplift pressures are really being transferred to those panels that are clipped and screwed down, not even necessarily to the rafters. So there are things that are done that really do need some engineering review, which is a big part of what we do with our products. But I've seen that product implemented. I think it would be somewhat risky to go in that direction, although I could see the advantage of not making penetrations in those cases, right? That's the advantage, right? You're not poking holes in your multi-million-dollar TPO commercial roof system, right? Like that's pretty attractive, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. That adhesive, does it last long? I have no idea.
That's about all I had. Appreciate it. The answer, but I was thinking the same thing. It just kind of, that's not an engineer. That's not my forte, but it just, thinking through that is like, okay, they could just pull right off the shingle or pull the shingle up.
Great questions. So we are down to the final of it. Brett, any final words you'd like to say about asphalt shingle roofs?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that we didn't really talk about, which is a big topic, maybe you mentioned something about it, was, your ITC, right, related to your roofing costs and your proposal.
We did not cover that.
which, look, I'm on the racking side. I've been a solar salesperson. This topic has kind of evolved over the decade and a half that I've been in the industry. I know the original guidance by the IRS was pretty vague about it. I've worked for contractors many years ago where, you'd say, you can add the cost of the roofing to your proposal and take that 30% off of the roofing. Sounds great. There's now like solar tax police running around for the most part. That's also kind of evolved into, well, okay, the roofing surface that, we were working on, we redid that roofing surface. We can claim that. And then some guys have done, just underneath the footprint of the array. I do see advertisements, like my social media is filled with, roofing, construction, solar, these are the things that I look at all the time. There's a lot of contractors out there that are, working with the numbers and offering free roofs and stuff like that. But it's just like, Jake, for sure, you like as an owner of a solar company, like, how did you guys approach that? I know there are ways to kind of like on the back end, kind of like help that customer pay for that roof, with things, but it's a little bit of a touchy topic.
Yeah. So I guess technically it was that the application, the form itself it was vague. It was gray area. It said whatever the construction cost of a solar project or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And to Brett's defense, contractors would argue, okay, well then let's do the footprint of the array. Let's do that percentage of the whole roof. And some contractors like the roofing, like when I think it was Dennis was asking about a partial roof, maybe it was someone else. Some people would say that the contractor says that I have to do the entire roof plane. And so I'm not just going to do the footprint of the solar. I'm going to do the roof plane because that's what it costs me to get solar on my house, much like an electrical upgrade. So the form is vague for sure. The instructions, however, if you go read the instructions from the IRS, it is not vague. It specifically says do not include the roof. But that is not the form that you're filling out. It's not what you're going to be held to. So people called that a gray area. However, when that new IRA came out, I believe it just snatched all that gray area right out, and it is now black and white. You cannot, and will not be able to count the roof as the tax credit.
Yeah. Which kind of, this topic kind of is a good segue into the other main topic that we're working on right now, which is U.S. domestic content and that 40% ITC that's kind of on the table for commercial applications and third-party owned systems. So us as a racking company, we understand that making products in the United States is actually going to contribute substantially to our customers being able to get a 40% tax credit on their deals, especially leases, PPAs, commercial jobs. So, we are manufacturing rails that are U.S. manufactured, mounts. We're working on a lot of other components and systems. So, like that's a big topic right now in our world is U.S. manufactured products, and that right now is a 40% requirement. It's going up to 55%. Eventually, and so like that, for example, that railless product that we're talking about before will also be U.S. manufactured, and it's a perfect product for comp shingle applications. Consistent cost on your racking and labor across the board, very inexpensive. Uses all the same components that you already have at your distributor. Just one new component uses the EverSeal butyl, and wherever you have a clamp, you put them out, and it's super easy to put down. So that's my little plug. We're doing a roadshow right now with CD Green Tech, Wesco, Greenwich, ABC Supply. So we're in the process of really pushing that product out. We're doing pilots and demonstrations right now. So please, if you guys are watching, check it out. Come out and try it. And we're happy to have new customers with this product because it's pretty exciting for us.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. Thank you, David. Brett. Asphalt shingle master, sales master, solar master, manufacturer, inventor, it sounds like.
You're making me blush, man. Jeez.
Thank you very much for being on with us. We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
See you guys.